Already? Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Ron Merritt. I'll be your chairperson this morning, introducing everybody. To my right, or to my left, is our recording secretary, is Kara Belshaw, and to her left is Lynn Nesbitt, and to her left is Cynthia Stevens. Representing the city of Winnipeg is Matthew Borasek. Close? Barocas, sorry. We'll be hearing an application for revision in regards to the assessment. According to the Municipal Assessment Act, the matters for which revision has been described in each application will limit discussions to those matters. The statements that the applicant or the assessor make at these hearings are sworn testimony, and anybody speaking in these matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by City Council and is independent of it, along with the city administration. We make our decisions based on the evidence provided at this hearing and issue a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decision in respect to the application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to application for exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included in the board's order. In respect to the hearing this morning, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the other applicants may have, and that'll be the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each party will have the opportunity to summarize at the very end if they wish. Once all evidence about the application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket this morning. The session will close after the application has been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live stream recorded and will be part of the public record. Saying that we don't have a Bible this morning, we will affirm everybody. So I'll ask the assessor to be sworn in.
Please state your name. Do you affirm the evidence you present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Please state your name.
Diane Schindelman.
Do you affirm the evidence you present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Okay, please state your name.
Justin Zarnowski.
Do you affirm the evidence you present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name.
Alexander Eckman?
Do you affirm the evidence you present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Right, the first item on the docket this morning is 914 Grosvenor Avenue. So, Mr. Assessor, you can take us through this property.
All right, file number 19-1997, 914 Grosvenor Avenue, roll number 12023013000. Roll year 2020, reference date April 1st, 2018, assessed value $1,228,000. It's an apartment. One building, 3 stories, built in 1913, so it's very old. 15 suites, we've got 10 outdoor parking spots, a construction class D, wood or steel frame exterior walls. If you go to page 2, you'll see that they've been good in handing in their mailers. So no issues there. So the income, the value is determined by the income approach. It's model generated. We've got average monthly rent of $910.08, 12 2-bedrooms, 3 1-bedroom units. With our model parameters and our model 6.6 cap rate, comes out to our rounded value of $1,228,000 for 81,866 suites. So if you go to page 4, These are our rental comps. So these are comparables in the area. Comparables 1 and 2 are newer, though still old. Comparables 3 and 4 are old as well. We've got effective year built in 1913 on them. And they have higher rents than the subject property. So I looked at, on page 5, I took a look at their income and expenses, which can be found in the final pages of my brief. So what I did is I took a look at doing a 3-year stabilization of the property. And the appellant and I were talking beforehand, and she was good enough to talk about some of the issues that were going on with the property. And so looking at what I had done initially before I'd received the appellant's brief is, if you look down on page 5, we have repair and maintenance. The repair and maintenance line for 15 suites, we've got some really high numbers. For 2015, we've got $70,009. So divided by 15, that's 4,667 a unit. There are some purchases for windows and doors, which can be found in the appellant's brief, but I didn't have access to that information, so removing that would bring it down to $2,865 per unit. 2016 and 2017 are $5,287 a unit and $3,442 on a per unit basis. Now, this is a lot higher than we typically see in terms of repair and maintenance. Typically, we see between 1,000 and 1,500. Now, having received the appellant's brief, and some of the pictures that they've shown, it looks like the building it's quite original to it. And given the age of the building, like it's 105 years old. It's really old. Built in 1913. I had made an adjustment to the R&M. Now, what I had done after submitting the evidence is that I've run a scenario with 2,000 per unit R&M on an ongoing basis, which would change the net operating income to $70,798 with a 6.6 cap. That would generate a reduced value of $1,072,000. This property, just not getting ahead of myself, it probably should be inspected. It wasn't appealed in the past. Last go around, the assessment was $1,150,000. At 2,000 a unit, it drops it below what it was last time. I want to see what's going on in terms of how much of those expenses would be expected to carry on in perpetuity, and how much would just be yearly R&M, keeping it going. But I think my initial scenario, which I have in my brief on page 5 at $1,200 a unit, is too low, given the age of the building and the pictures I've seen afterwards. So what I'm doing now is I'm revising my valuation to $1,072,000, and that's using the 6.6 cap rate. Cap rate chart can be found on page 6. And 6A, there's an example of some sales. We have, they're not meant to be comparables. Sample of actual sales that took place during the reference period is just to illustrate the accuracy of the model, to substantiate the model-derived cap rates, which we get from the sales and income and expense statements we received. from the owners every year. So without having the opportunity to inspect it and just reviewing the applicant's brief, I feel that given the age of the building, boosting it to 2,000 a unit is what I can do right now. I'd have to go in there and take a look at it. So again, just to summarize, my revised number would be 1,072,000 rounded. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you in agreement, Ms. Gentleman? Or you still want to pursue it?
I think I have to think about it, but that's better. We appreciate you looking at the
Yeah.
expenses. So.
Yeah.
Questions of the assessor?
Sure. Do you have any other evidence on expenses with other similar buildings, like your comparables that you used that were also the same age? Do you have any expenses on those to see if they're even higher than 2,000 a unit?
No, I do not.
Do you know for your, I know you didn't use the 49% expense ratio. I'm not sure what your number works out to now. It's a little bit higher, obviously. Do you know how many properties in the model would be, or where that model number comes from, or even your slightly higher number? Is there very many other similar old buildings?
We adjust, yeah, for older buildings or buildings that have like big foundation issues or they're dilapidated, what we'll do is we'll adjust we call it the income quality in our property, and that basically just ups the expense ratio, which is assigned to that property. Older buildings typically do have higher expense ratios. My revised expense ratio would be 57.17%. And the expenses would total 94,505.
When you're considering the expense ratio, are you considering the amount of units that are in a building?
Yeah, definitely, like especially on a repair and maintenance perspective. Typically, like we review the mailers and we see typically it takes place, what comes in as under normal operation without capital expenditures, we're looking at 1,000 and 1,500. Now, you guys have a really old building, that's why I went above that. And I've seen you, I looked at your evidence yesterday, so I felt that going to without having the time to take a look at it, going to 2,000 was something I was comfortable doing.
I think he's talking more of the economies of scale of.
Yeah, I mean, you recognize that a building, there's 100 suites, is
Yeah.
easier to manage the common elements than one with 15.
Yes.
But does the model recognize that?
We would be using buildings, the model uses buildings of the same vintage, similar in terms of square foot, like we have our cap rates divided up into 3 size brackets, so we do take size into consideration.
For cap rate, but not expense ratio?
Your expense ratio would have been generated from low-rise properties, mailers submitted to us in the area of similar vintage.
Okay.
No further questions.
Ms. Nisbet?
So just so that I'm clear, you're leaving the income side of your adjustments the same?
I haven't changed the income.
Haven't changed the income, so
But the expenses, I've.
it's just all on the expense side?
It's all in the repair and maintenance.
Okay.
So there's no boost
Right.
to the management or reduction in the
Okay,
management. It's just-
and that works out to how much a suite?
On the repair and maintenance?
Oh, 2,000 you said?
2,000, yeah.
And your market value is how much then per
About
suite?
1,072,000.
That's the total market value, and then per suite? Sorry,
Okay, just gotta divide that by 15. So that would be 71,466.
Okay. And you, I just want to be clear, you're saying that on average, I think is what you said, for properties of this vintage, this size, about 1,500 is the usual?
Well, properties overall, typically we see,
Overall.
but I'm taking into consideration the fact that the building's over 100 years old, and I've seen other pictures, and I've seen the actual work that money that they're spending, I've seen that
Okay.
worth, so I feel that I could go up to 2,000, but beyond that, I'd have to really take a look at it. I have to go and inspect, unfortunately, just with time to listen.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens?
Your cap rate, so is this considered low-rise B? Well, they all look the same anyway, I guess. On the City of Winnipeg,
Yeah, we have the same parameters.
yeah.
To,
And so, given the age of the building, so you're saying that the model, obviously, you say it's taking into account buildings of similar vintage?
yes, we've
Because
got.
coming in at that cap in the middle there with a 1913 building seemed,
So we have 6.6 on the cap. So what we have for this
Oh, thank you.
is for buildings that are over 1,500 square feet in this market region, and earlier than 1945, we've got a 6.6.
okay, that's all I had, thanks.
So there's been no inspection of the property?
No.
Okay. So, so to follow up, Ms. Stevens, so the most we can anticipate for the subject property in regards to cap rate is 6.6?
Yes.
And that's the maximum you can,
That's what we have for the market region, the size and the age.
so you feel as if with no inspection, but in talking about expenses, et cetera, with the applicant, you feel as if the expenses should be increased?
Well, if you look at my actuals on page 5, like they are spending quite a lot of money, and without jumping ahead, it's a lot of line items. It seems as though they're trying to bring it up to speed, perhaps. They'll know more than I will, so I won't make any assumptions there. It's really high based on what we've.
Would you think about reverting based on the condition, based on the age? Would you think about just land value only? It's
No.
quite high, but,
No,
yeah,
definitely not.
okay. Okay, I thank you. Diane, your presentation?
Sure, we'll be able to go through a little bit faster because I think we're really down to just.
Just the expenses.
You can, hey, you
The
do a
one
lot of
issue.
work, you take your time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the property is a 15-unit, we know that. It's walk-up, no elevators, and 3 of the units are below grade. It's 105. At the reference date, it was 105 years old. It's 106 now. And Shindig Realty didn't start managing this property until 2018. So the manager before was the person that contracted all the repairs and maintenance and that sort of thing. We can go to page 2. Rental income 159, it's a little bit below what the assessor used. Vacancy at $3,000. Effective gross income 155,279, and total operating costs 101,356. And net operating income of 53,923 at a 6.6 cap rate, and we come to a value of $817,010. The row below, again, the rents are slightly lower than where the assessor's at. And that's reflective of the condition of the building and the fact that we're under rent control, and for some years ago, the manager at the time didn't do any increases on rent, not even guideline, about 5 years ago. That has since changed, but so we were starting at a lower point of rent before increases started happening. Also, an above guideline increase has never been done on this building as well.
And that's important to note here, because where the expenses have been so high, they're not artificially inflated, right? Every dollar that's coming out of the property is a dollar that's coming out of the owner's pocket. So it's not something where we're getting any sort of benefit by spending more. In fact, it directly impacts our actual bottom line.
On page 3 at the bottom, we have some comparable rents of buildings on Coburn, and they're in the area. And I unfortunately only had the 2015 rents, so what I did was I projected them using the guideline for 2 years to come to 2017 rents. So that's the second little graph on the bottom, or table on the bottom. So these rents again are similar to the subject rents. Page 4 you can see our expense ratios are, yes, they're very high. And that is a reflection of the age of the building and the fact that the work that was done in the past was not always high quality. So if they fixed something one year, sometimes they had to fix it the next year. And so it wasn't long-term investment into this building at that time.
And to answer the assessor's almost philosophical question, all of the expenses that we've had in the past aren't what you would call capital, where they're creating a lasting value. Like this is the duct tape on the pipes and not, putting in new pipes. So even though the expenses have been really high, they haven't actually established a lasting value in the building.
The cap rate, we're going with the same cap rate the assessor's using, and that's in consideration of using, our expense ratio. Deficiencies in the building, the boiler, for example, is old. It's original, or it's 40 years old, actually. It's not original, but it is 40 years old. We experienced a leak in the boiler a few years ago, and what was done at the time was just a Band-Aid. It was expensive to do the Band-Aid, but we weren't in a position to do a whole new boiler yet. A whole new boiler is going to be about $50,000, and so instead we spent $10,000 to do a Band-Aid on the existing boiler. So the boiler still has not been done. So the boiler is, like I said, it's finished, and I think we actually have to do it this year,
Yes.
or
We won't have heat.
we won't have heat. So I think that's probably.
I'm done.
It's starting to be done, okay. All right. The roof is in need of repair. And again, we've been doing Band-Aids all the way along. And the facade, we've done some repointing and some painting, but again, it also needs more. And we've done some windows, but we need to do more. The corridors haven't been done at all in a long time. And none of the suites are fully renovated. There's, I think, 3 that have been renovated. Most of the plumbing fixtures are very old. You'll see that in the photos. And I actually have Rebuttal, which has the actual apartment numbers on the suites, or on the photos, which I forgot to do in the original brief. And so given this information, we are at a value of $817,000. So instead of going to the subject photos in my brief, we have the same photos in the Rebuttal, which have the suite numbers, which I thought would be more helpful to see. And again, the photos actually, if we go to page 1 of Rebuttal, it's actually the same as page 5 in the brief, but we can go through the Rebuttal. Unfortunately, the photos you can't really see as well what we're really trying to show, but the ceiling in this suite 3 is actually, it's really, really leaking, but you can't see that in the photo like I can when we're taking the photo. There's a number of trip hazards in the building. The flooring in the next photo you can see is coming apart. Both the what's this called? Not laminate. What's this?
VCT, vinyl tile.
The vinyl tile and the hardwood are all old in almost all the suites. Suite 5, you can see the hardware. There's lots of door hardware that looks like this or worse. And then Suite 6, the plumbing fixtures are all very old. And Suite 7, there's more floor on page 2. Suite 7, you can see what the tubs, most of the tubs look like this. And Suite 8, you can see the old style sink and tile, and then the plumbing pipes running on the outside of the property, or of the wall. And this is what it's like. This is exactly what this is like. Suite 8 on page 4, you can see some walls falling apart in the kitchen, and you can see the original cabinets. Suite 9, there's some leaking on that window. Suite 9 on page 5. Again, the plumbing is, it's all, and the fixtures are all really old, and there's some water damage in the ceiling on Suite 9. And Suite 10, the flooring, and Suite 11, again, the tub is really bad, and page 6 as well. And Suite 11, you can see it's the plumbing fixtures again. And bathrooms and kitchens are, the most expensive things to maintain. And that's where we have a big job here. Suite 12, you can see the flooring. Most of the hardwood floors are like this. They all need to be re-sanded. And can we sand them, or are they too?
Yeah, it's almost prohibitive to sand them because it's sometimes cheaper just to put in a new vinyl floor.
Okay.
But in the kitchens, you can see also they've put that old vinyl tile on top of the hardwood, which creates that transition, and that's why we keep having to come back sometimes to do the same things. The proper thing to do is to rip it all out and have the same level of flooring.
And that's just indicative of the patching that's been done over a number of years rather than real repair solutions. So it's just more flooring in Suite 12 through Suite 17. Suite 4, the original cupboards in the kitchen, and all the original plumbing in the bathroom. Suite 10 has that modern green color. The other situation with this property is the tenants, and I guess this is also a good thing, is a lot of them have been there for some time, and to ask them to, move all their belongings from one side of their apartment to the other is really difficult, and they don't even want it. So that's kind of the situation there. If we look at page 15 on the rebuttal, you can see this is like someone's suite. This is not a locker room.
Second bedroom.
So just in numbers, out of the 15, we have 9 kitchens that are really bad. Like the cupboards are original and falling apart, and the flooring is bad. And we have 7 bathrooms that are really bad and leaking. And almost all the door hardware is bad. And anyways, that's the way it is.
And so the reality is, we have a building that's this old, that's even well-maintained, it's still gonna be about average for your expenses, right? Because you've got all the old building systems, everything's gonna just be older. Where you've got a building that's in disrepair, that's where those expenses go even higher. And so we're anticipating spending an awful lot of money in this building, but we haven't yet. And, having just taken over management last year, so we'll get to a point where this building might be closer to that model average, but we're certainly not there yet. And so that's why you can see those really high expenses. It's because we just haven't been able to take this back to that average that the model would project.
Finally, one other item is, this is also in the area where they have, they're determining if it's going to be a heritage.
Yeah, conservation district, and so that'll impact our ability to do At least we think exterior work on this type of building, certainly when you were talking about land value, a redevelopment is off the table for the, at least near future. And so we're gonna be very restricted in terms of what we can do here. It'll likely just be interior renovations, and that's the program that we're eventually gonna move forward with.
So for the record, you're seeking the 817?
We're looking for value closer to the 817, yes.
Questions in regards to the rebuttal information at all?
Let's just ask them all at once, when she's done her presentation.
Ms. Nesbitt, any questions in regards to the rebuttal information?
No, I don't think so.
Ms.
Thank you.
Stevens?
Where is this on Grosvenor? Is it between Stafford and Wentworth, or between Stafford and Harrow?
Stafford and, I guess,
What's between
Lilac. It's Lilac,
and
really.
Stafford?
it's just north
Okay,
of
okay.
the corner of Stafford and Grosvenor.
Okay.
It's north of that, north of the retail there.
Yeah, there's no pictures of it in anybody's brief, so I was just
Oh.
gonna, yeah. Okay, and so with the city's adjustment, it's your expense ratio that you're still looking to have increased there. Okay. Okay, that's all I had. Thanks.
Okay, I just have just a couple of questions. In regards to the rebuttal, when were these pictures taken of the interior?
Most of them were around 2017,
17, okay.
16 and 17, actually.
Yeah, none of them were post-reference.
Okay. All right. I think we are going to be asking questions of your presentation. So, Mr. Assessor, whenever you're ready.
Okay. On page 2 of your market income valuation, you've got the rental income and total annual income at 159. When I look at your income statement, did you add parking and laundry to that?
Parking is actually, I know I didn't mention this in your presentation, but the parking is actually on a separate roll. It's on another roll.
So there's a townhouse complex that also has the parking lot, so that's separately assessed.
So I took the parking out. I think I inadvertently took the laundry out at the same time, but I'm happy to put that back in. But the parking is on a separate roll.
You took some vacancy off this place. Looking at the bottom of page 2, looks like you guys have been no vacancy since sometime in 2016 at the very least. So this is like a market evaluation, or this is like just a calculation of the actuals?
It's more market. And I think we're expecting to have some vacancy if we are going to try and do some renovations.
Okay. So the rent roll at the bottom of the page there, it looks like there's 2 suites that are much higher. There's a 2-bedroom that's $1,100.
Yes.
And then there's a 2-bedroom that's $1,162. Have those?
Those have had some work done.
They've had some work done to
Yes,
them?
yeah.
What kind of work's been done to those?
They would have a newer kitchen, laminate countertop, a hodgepodge of appliances, wherever they were on sale when the old manager was running it, so.
Now, do you know when this was renovated? Was this renovated back in 15, 16?
We didn't do it, so I don't know.
Okay. So you guys took it over in 2018, and you've been trying to bring it up to speed since then. You've been doing renos. Would you consider the work you've been doing above and beyond what a normal operation of an apartment without trying to improve it, it's kind of?
I'd say to assess what we've done in the last year would be closer to doing an assessment of what we're actually gonna need to do. Get our hands on what we're gonna have to do, because when you've got these residential properties with the potential for an above guideline increase, you wanna concentrate the work in 1 year so you get your maximum above guideline increase. So it's not, when you own these older buildings, it's not sensible to do kind of one in 1 year, one in another year. It's sensible to do an assessment, try and get them all done in one. So that's the stage we're at. Do that assessment, likely in the next year or two, we'll be making the big capital investments.
Okay. So currently you're doing a bunch of capital stuff to bring it up?
No.
No?
No, we haven't done anything yet.
Okay.
But yeah, we're at the, planning assessment stage. So to date, it'd be patchwork.
Okay. You guys would be open to having the property inspected, just to,
Absolutely.
okay, those are my questions.
Thank you. Ms. Nesbit?
No
Questions
questions.
of the applicant? Nothing?
No, I have
Cynthia?
nothing, no, I have nothing further.
Either party one submission?
Yeah, I mean, just generally, like, we're comfortable with, the expense ratio we've included. It's consistent with the history of the property. We're hoping it'll get better in the future, but it's not better now.
Are you okay?
We've gone 2,000 on it, which is higher than what we typically see and try and take it into account to go any higher than necessitate an inspection.
Right. We'll go to the next property, which is Jefferson Avenue, 597. So the floor is yours.
All right, 597 Jefferson, file number 19-2018, roll number 110416960000. Lawyer 2020, April 1st, 2018, reference date, assessed value, $9,291,000. Apartment, 1971, 121 suites, 150 outdoor parking spots. Construction class B, reinforced concrete frame. If you go to page 2, they've handed in their mailers, or at least so they have information. Page 3 shows our income value summary, taken from the model. 13 bachelors, 43 one-bedroom, 55 two-bedroom. We got 121 units with their average monthly rent of $819.19. 5.3 cap as per age, size, and area. Estimated market value rounded $9,391,000. So if you go to page 4, you'll see the rent comparable. Rent comparables taken out from that direction, the city. They range from $832 to $998. We have it at $819. I looked on the bottom there on page 4. You'll see I made a chart just based on what was submitted to us in calculating the potential gross rents. We've got $817.52, very similar to what we're assigning in the model. The expense analysis. Looking at this property, I did another 3-year stabilization looking at the expenses. One of the major lines that I made an adjustment here was for R&M. So for R&M, what we did was we saw that the R&M was really high. So on average, over the 14, 15, 16, it was coming out to $3,640.42. Again, that's much more than we're typically seeing. Most of the properties analysis cap are setting around 1,000. We're saying between 1,000 and 1,500 is more typical. So I ran a scenario, just picking the top of that range, just to see where that would be as a starting point, what sort of numbers would come out. So I used 1,500 a unit, and using stabilized expenses, using the 5% management, and utilities, whatnot, I came out to 651,000. There's also a line for expenses, which is similar to our expenses, 656,000. There's also a line there in yellow in regards to the rent. Perhaps the applicant will be better suited to discuss this in regards to the situation, ownership situation they have there, but they're essentially, they don't own the land the building's on. We're looking at the building as, we're looking at the assessment as land, building inclusive, like we assess all the other buildings in the city. So given that the R&M is 1,500 a unit, running it at the high end comes out to an expense ratio, expense amount highly similar to the model expenses, and our income and expense potential gross rents are highly similar to what the model is cranking out, 817 versus 819. I didn't make a change. Page 6, you'll see our cap rate chart. 6A is our cap rate sale examples. Pages 8 through 15 are just the rent rolls and the revenue and expenses that I took my information to make my chart from. Then I went to their website just to check it out. Page 16 are the pictures of the property. So trying to figure out, well, where are these renovations going? Why is it so high? So a picture on page 16, you see the exterior of the building, and then underneath you can see that so there's been some work done to the property. So this is just right off the website. So the rest of my brief, aside from the last page, is just showing what 597 Jefferson is advertising, basically. So it would seem that this would be part of where the high expenses are coming from, is that they're fixing the place up. And then the last page is just the last decision. Last time it went from 13 to 8,053,000, and this time we're asking for 9,391,000. That's my presentation.
Thank you. Questions of the assessor?
Excuse me, yes, thank you. Did you get a chance to visit this building?
No, I am familiar with it, though I live right around there.
Okay. If I told you that the pictures at the back of your brief, there's only one suite that was done like your picture on page 16, and that's the one you have a picture of, and that the pictures on page 18, 19, and 20 are actually, they're, what?
Virtually rendered.
Virtually rendered. You can take an empty apartment, you can send an empty photo to a company, and they will fix it up for you to see what it'll look like.
Virtually, I've never heard of that before.
Yeah. So the pictures on 17, 18, and 19 and 20, well, 19 is just a picture from outside, and 20 are not real.
So,
So the page 16 is suite 101.
okay,
So that was actually done because that was well, I'll give it my evidence, but page 16 is suite 101. And there's one other suite, suite 907, that's been renovated, and out of the 121, that's it.
so 907.
So 907 and 101. The other ones do not look anything like this. But I mean, well, sorry?
They smell like.
Well, we can give,
Yeah, so you'll see that on ours. Anyways, so that's, okay, we'll talk about that after. So with respect to your expense ratio, again, is that for, I noticed your comps are 1986, 1984, and there's only two that are of similar age. The expense ratio, would that be for this age of building, or?
Those are just the rent comps. This is an example of rents. The expenses don't have anything to do with these properties. It's just assigned by the model based on the age and area. I ran a scenario with 1,500 a unit on page 5, and it came out to close to what the model's saying. So that's why I didn't adjust anything.
Okay, so it's, your numbers are based basically on the model.
The income, the expense ratio is generated from the model. I verified it with a 1,500 per unit scenario.
So with respect to the cap rate, you said that you didn't take into account the fact that there's a land lease, that there's separate titles for the building and the land. You just valued it as if that doesn't exist.
Yeah, we look at it as, we assess the land and the building, what they would sell for together in the open market.
Regardless of whether
It's
they're
possible.
separate owners.
But it's not possible, though, in this case.
That's how we're assessing it.
And so when you're applying that cap rate, you have these non-comparable apartments here to justify the cap rate, to show, I guess, the model is accurate?
These are just examples of sales. The modelers have looked at the income and expenses, and they've calculated a cap rate. It's just to show that what the model is applying is in line with what's actually out there.
And so with respect to these transactions, did you look into any of them?
Me personally, I wasn't involved in this process.
Okay, so, but it's part of your brief, right? So looking at the Talbot example, when you've got a 4% cap rate there, would it be fair to say a person purchasing that might well have been buying it on a basis that isn't capping the existing revenue?
Well, if they were looking to buy it to renovate it, then the existing revenue wouldn't be as heavily considered.
And so in that instance, then, that cap rate that it was purchased on wouldn't really be what the actual buyer was buying it on?
If that was the instance, yes.
Okay, and so, and when you've got the other examples, both, say Maxwell Place and Ward, if you've got buildings that had substantial renovations or were newer, presumably those would also be purchased at a lower cap rate.
I'm not sure what cap rate they would purchase it for.
But a better, newer renovated building would be purchased at a lower cap rate than one that needs a lot of work.
It could be. Some people purchase buildings to renovate them and then get above RTB limit bump, and they see that as an opportunity, so they make those better. It depends on the investor. You know, we just looked at what these were purchased for, what the income they submitted, and the calculated cap rate.
So would it be fair to say, you the assessment department picked out 4 low cap rates and used that to justify the model?
No. We have other cap rates that are higher than this. We have some that are 6. That's why our cap rate doesn't go from 4 to 5. We have higher ones as well.
Yeah.
These are just examples in the market. Like, not every sale in the city of Winnipeg is between 4 and 5. And like, for example, our last property, we assigned a 6.3 cap rate to it. These are just examples.
So you have higher ones, but you included the lower ones in this example?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything further?
Sorry. Did you, and just a little bit more on the cap rate, so were you able to find, well, I guess you weren't able to find any cap rates for buildings that were similar to the subject?
No, I'm not involved in the process of developer.
And certainly, there weren't other cap rates that were considered where there was a building and land separately titled,
I wasn't involved in it, I can't say.
at least that you were aware of. There wasn't any of that. There weren't any examples of that situation included in the cap rate that you're aware of.
It's not the typical scenario.
Okay.
When you saw our brief, did you, for the last property, once you saw it, you realized that there was some significant expense issues. You didn't consider that this time?
I went to the website, it looked like there was some renovated suites. I saw, it looks like on page 17, there's one main floor suite that's been renovated, and then on page 18, it looks like there's a balcony overlooking some trees, so it looked like there was more than one that was being renovated. I didn't make an adjustment. It didn't seem like the pictures that were being advertised matched the pictures in your brief, so I didn't make a change.
That it's, I mean, you'd agree that it's advertising and that it may not be exactly what's in the building.
That's what they're showing as the building,
Okay.
so I don't know.
So if only one of the suites had been renovated, would that change your opinion about our, taking into account our brief and the condition of the building?
I think the expense ratio is much higher than what we typically see. So I would think there could be other capital expenditures happen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. That's good.
Okay. Did you have the 2017 statements available to you when you did your expense analysis? I noticed that you only,
Yeah,
you used 2014 to 16, so I just.
So, I believe Helen, they took over and they, sometime mid-2017, so we didn't have a full year. So I was just going with the most recent full years.
Full year, that's
Or else I
right.
can't be accurate.
Understood, okay. And the rent that's highlighted in yellow, that's the land lease?
Pardon?
The rent that's highlighted in yellow, is that a
Yeah.
lease on the land?
Yeah, that's from 2017, yes.
That is from 2017, sorry?
Yes. So you see on page 9, they don't have a full year of income. So I guess I threw it in there because I had it, but on page 8.
Okay, yeah. I see that for the full year. On your page 5, though, the highlighted yellow, that is the lease for the land.
Yeah,
And you just took a 2-year average, there is nothing for 2016?
I wasn't considering
Okay.
the rent.
Okay. It shows as an expense though, however, right?
Must not be able to find it, or else I would have
Page
put
10.
it. Page 10. Bank charges. I wasn't considering it, so it's not something that I use in my 1,500 a unit scenario.
In your R&M, right? I got that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens?
Yeah, I was just going to just confirm that, so you said the R&M was averaging about 3,000, but in the scenario you ran here, you put it at the 1,500.
Yeah, I saw pictures, renovated suites.
You saw that, yeah, okay. That's all I had, thanks.
Isn't there a pool in the back of this property? No?
I've never been to the back of the property, huh?
Okay.
Is
Is there a pool?
No, there's a
No?
real question.
Okay. Thinking of the wrong one. The average increase for apartment buildings from, in the area, do you have a figure from the last assessment?
No, that wasn't provided to us in terms of averages.
Okay. And I see that it's on leased land. So how do you evaluate the property, the income approach for the subject, but it's on leased land, and you have a payment each and every year of around 200,000. You ever run across that? I have never.
It's certainly not typical.
Okay.
So
So how do you account for the land and the building being separate?
it's definitely an unusual situation. We're looking.
Who owns the land offhand? The owner? I don't know.
Canada Life owns the land.
Canada Life?
The land,
Okay.
and then we own, one of our company owns the land.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're looking at it if a purchaser was to purchase the property, land, building, all in one.
Yeah, but it's leased land. Do you know how long the lease runs for?
Looking ahead to their brief, I'm sure they'll go over it.
Okay. Okay. If you don't know offhand,
I think it's
it's
a
fine.
99-year lease that
Okay.
started maybe 4
Okay.
years ago.
Okay. That's good enough. Ms. Gentleman, your presentation?
Thank you. Oh, actually, I have rebuttal as well.
Rebuttal in regards to rents?
The rebuttal is, again, I put suite numbers on the pictures, which is not in my original brief, and I included, at the time of doing briefs, we
That's
didn't.
part of that's not rebuttal in regards to his information, right?
Well, it is, because he has pictures of suites that don't look anything like the building.
Okay.
So we wanted to give a
Okay.
flavor that,
You can submit that then.
The other thing in the rebuttal as well is a statement for 2017, because subsequent to doing the briefs, we got information from the former owner. Can I include that?
So that's new
It's-
information?
It's new, but it's the correct full year for 2017. If,
Can't put in new stuff.
no, okay, that's fine.
Okay. Okay.
So you want me to tear it off?
Yes, if you don't mind.
I can make up one.
So you want to present your rebuttal information?
Sure.
Okay. And this is just signifying that there are different numbers and different pictures for the subject?
Correct. Thank you. Oops, do I have one? Did I keep? Oh, okay.
Didn't give them all away.
Right, the floor is yours.
Okay, so again, the first few pictures are pictures that are actually in our original brief, but it's just showing the actual suite numbers so that we know that this is exactly how they look now. So I see this didn't get page numbered, but we can just page through them. The first picture is 11th floor hallway. The next one is suite 611. Again, we'll go over the more details in our brief, so I won't go through each one. But I just wanted you to see what the actual building does look like, since there was no inspection again in this case. If we page through. Suite 109 those are original cupboards, and how these suites actually look. We'll talk about the tub freezers and that sort of thing in our brief. If we keep paging through, we'll see, just to get a feel of what the building is really like. Suite 201, Suite 503, Suite 108, Suite 301, 204, Suite 1104, 1004, Suite 708.
Yeah, you just tell me.
Suite 810, 1004, 510. Again, it's just, it's just really to see that of the 121 suites, most of them look like this, and 2 of them do not.
And in terms of rebuttal, I'll ask my hipper colleague to explain how that digital rendering process works.
Yeah, so what happens is that tenant vacated, the suite is in fairly poor condition, it smells terrible, because they had a pet and they weren't supposed to. And then we send those photos to a company in China, and that company in China uses Photoshop to put in furniture, clean up the walls, change colors, put paintings on the walls, those kinds of things. So that's why they're on our website.
So it's what it could look like if you're gonna go and rent the suite for a market rent, but it's not what it does look like.
The last,
I think you had said that there's only 2 units,
That
probably
are-
similar.
That are actually, yeah.
Renovated.
Okay.
I just want to draw your attention to sort of the last 6 pages, starting with, I'm sorry, there's no page numbers. The last 6 pages of the rebuttal, it just shows the cap rate comparables, and again, they're obviously not selected to go with the subject property. And then finally, on the last 4 pages are pictures of the rent comparables used by the assessment department, 761 Leela, and the interior, 771 Leela, and which both buildings have been renovated on the interior, 445 Partridge and 150 Adson, which Adson has 1 picture of the interior as well. Thank you.
Any questions in regards to the rebuttal? Matthew?
I've never heard of this digital rendering before. Is this something that's common?
It's new to us as well.
We probably did it in the last few months for marketing purposes. But yeah, it's definitely newer to the industry, newer to Winnipeg. It just saves the hassle of staging a suite and the cost associated with it.
So, as people move out, you are renovating the suites, is that correct? And so,
Or really, we will be renovating the suites. The 101 was actually like a storage closet / workroom.
Yeah.
And so when we bought the building, we said it's not efficient to have this be that, so we turned it back into a suite, so that necessitated new materials. We've really only renovated 1 suite that was a suite when we bought it and is a suite now. And 2 total of the 122 suites.
121, yeah.
121.
do you know the name of the company that does this? I want to check them out.
I can email it to you, I don't know it offhand.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Prep for rebuttal over my question.
Mr. Nesbitt?
No questions?
No? Ms. Stevens?
Just, when you're showing, that, on your last 6 pages there, you're showing what these, the city's comps actually look like in comparison to your property, but again, some of these could have been rendered as well, right? I mean, there's some nice looking
I
suites
thought that
in here.
one that Leela looked rendered as well.
Yeah, so, they may not look like that.
Yeah, this is certainly gonna
Just
make
to
the
confirm.
assessor and your
Yeah.
lives much harder, but
Yeah,
we're sorry. It makes it easier to rent the suites.
I think that's all I had, thanks.
Thank you. Your presentation?
Thank you. So we're familiar, it's a 121-unit apartment building. The applicant does not own the land. Canada Life owns the land, that's been established. And there was 1 unit at the time of purchase that was a maintenance shop. And we have since turned it into, back into an apartment as discussed. The land lease is a substantial expense. It's like you said, it's about $200,000 a year. And what happens with that is it's a function of the revenue. So as the revenue goes up, the land lease payment goes up as well. So they've got us from both sides there. We can't, if we increase the revenue, we have to pay more. At the end of the land lease, the improvements on the land go to the landowner, that being Canada Life, not the applicant. And for this reason, it can't just be, the only thing that can be sold in this property is the building on top of the land and not the land at the same time. And so it's always gonna, for the next 50 years, it's gonna be this situation until Canada Life decides to sell the land. And that's not happening for 50 years. This is why we feel that the cap rate should be not model-driven. It's got to be considered to be, this is a different situation. The market income valuation, I've used the 2017 rent roll for July, which is when the applicant took over. It was July 24th, 2017. And then we added, I added in the increases that were happening for the balance of that year. And I came to the $1,166,586. Used the 3% vacancy rate, and operating costs of $656,039 for net operating income of $475,549. The $656, I've excluded the land payment out of that. That is just the expenses, and it's very, and so I took the land lease payment out of that, and to make this.
So we really struggled with how to do an income approach for a property that has that bifurcated income, right? Because there's the lease and then there's the actual building, kind of the residual building rent. And so we thought, do we want to split it? And then we, with the expenses, and that'll be so far from how this would normally be done that we thought it would be more confusing than helpful. So instead, we excluded the land lease payments from the operating costs and really are accounting for the fact that there's a land lease and the inability of somebody to really purchase both in the cap rate, to say that if you're buying just the building, you're going to buy it at a much higher cap rate than you would building and land. And we know that, having bought just the building in 2017, that it wasn't, like, you couldn't buy just the building at a 5.3 cap. We bought it at, I think it was an 8.2, 8.3. So we struggled with that concept, but we thought this was the clearest way to deal with that, is to just say, recognizing that land lease, instead of doing two income streams, we would recognize it in the cap rate, and so that's how we led to this calculation.
So this is this calculation is like the assessor says, it's like a normal calculation for a building. It's the rent, it's the normal expenses for this building, and just with a slightly higher cap rate than the assessment department is using. So there's no land lease payment or nothing weird in this calculation. It's like a normal apartment calculation. Page 3, 4, and 5, and 6 are the income and expense reports that were provided by the former owner, and just supporting the annual expenses and rents that we're using here. Page 9, what we did is we took the expenses, the revenue and expenses from July 24th, 2017 to December 31st, 2017, and so that gave us our first column year-to-date. So this is the actual year-to-date since the applicant purchased the building. And then in the second column is where we've projected the full year of revenue and expenses. So if you can see the land lease payment is in there at a full $197,972, but then I add it back at the end to come to the projected earnings of $470, even though that's not really the case. I mean, the earnings are $272, but to make it normal, we've added back that land lease payment. Page 10, we have some market comparables for the rents. 611 Jefferson, which is very close to the subject. $845 for one bedroom, $968 for a two bedroom, and 1944 Main, $650 and $750, and 480 Charles Street, $859 and $980. If you'll notice, in the subject property, parking is included in the rent. and that wouldn't be the case in any of our comparables. We didn't find any that were the same.
As well as cable, which is a pretty
Sorry, as
unique
well as
situation
cable.
too.
I will get to that as well. And again, it's a rent-controlled building. I don't know if the former owners ever did.
No.
The former owners never did any above guideline increases. So again, we're sitting with the rents as they are. They can't be any higher other than guideline increases. And until we do some renovations, this is where they're going to stay. Page 11 and 12 is the rent roll that was from the date of purchase, July 24th, 2017. Page 13, we use a 3% vacancy, which is in accordance with the assessment department. And the expense analysis, the tenants pay basically a gross rent. It includes water, electricity, heat, and enhanced cable. The cable bill for 2017 is about $55,358, and that's what it is per year. We've had to project that number as well. We found that the cable and utilities expenses are going up faster than the guideline is, so that's, you know, as the years go on, until we do a renovation, the income is eroded. You've seen in the pictures, and I'll show you briefly again, many of the tenants, because hydro is included, they have 2 and 3 freezers. They have a ton of electrical things in their apartments. There's the hydroponics in one of the units. And again, when hydro is included, it's easy for them to have all these extra things. And most of them are very old and inefficient, so they're drawing a lot of power. The building is 45 years old. Many of the components are original. The boiler, the roof, the windows, and the parking lot are all from 1971. Many of the kitchens are original, and the appliances, like I said, are inefficient. We need to do significant upgrades to this property, and including things that aren't really going to get us any more rent, like paving the parking lot and doing the roof. Half the roof is original, the other half has been done. When we inspected the building about a year ago, 2 years ago.
This was around that purchase date.
Yeah, around 2017. We found the tenants, again, when they're not paying the electric bill themselves, they leave windows open with the air conditioning on and televisions on and fans being used with the air conditioning when no one's home, and all the multiple fridges and freezers. We found that in many of the 120 suites at the time, because the other one wasn't done yet. We thought about metering each suite for hydro, and determined that it was going to cost $1 million to do this. So that's not going to happen. On the next page, you'll see a chart that shows the condition of some of the main items in the building that will be replaced. They haven't been yet. The hot water boilers, gas-fired boilers, expansion tanks, rooftop exhaust fans, the backup generator, windows, $550,000 to do the windows in that building will have to be done, and patio doors, $525,000. The elevator, $380,000. The parking lot, in about 5 years, we have to do for about $235,000. These are all estimates today, or I guess around 2017, when we did the inspection of the building. And typically, these numbers are certainly not going to hold for a number of years, and always we do find that we get an estimate, and then the actual cost is much higher in the end. There has been a fair bit of water damage in the building. We had the same situation at number 1 Evergreen Place a number of years ago, and you really don't know the extent of the water damage, because water comes in and you don't know where it comes from, and it goes all over the place, and you don't really know anything until you actually get a contractor in to what they do is they have to put in a swing stage and determine what the situation is. So we had similar situation at One Evergreen, and we found out that we had to replace all the cladding on the building. So that's something that we're thinking
Is possible here.
definitely possible here. So page 15, as you've seen some of these photos, it's just don't have the suite numbers. You can see the water damage on page 15 and page 16. Just the general condition of the building is it is in disrepair, and we found that many of the tenants are older, and you know, they have the carts to move everything around the building, and it's hard to not hit the walls and things like that, and that's fine, we understand that, but it's just constant maintenance. And that's what we found in this particular building. There's something about the plumbing,
There is galvanized plumbing in the building as well.
galvanized plumbing.
And the kitchen drains often back up. We're told because people pour grease down them, but it's hard to pinpoint that.
Yeah, so we find that we have maintenance staff in the building that are attending to these little things, as any apartment building has, and find that that's the most cost-effective is to have people on staff to do those sort of things, because it's frequent plug drains and leaky taps and air conditioning failure. You can see we'll look at the following photographs just briefly again, and to see the true condition. The property taxes for this building are much higher than they should be, and we find that we feel that the former owner just couldn't stay above water, and that is part of the reason. They never did appeal an assessment to get the assessment correct, and so that's why it's been out of hand. One of the former owners was not well, and so certainly the last number of years of owning the property, nothing was really done. The secretary was kind of running the building is what we found out, and so that's one of the reasons why it is the way it is. So the next page is, again, you've seen in the rebuttal, but basically we just wanted to point out all the freezers and all the fridges and the condition of the units. And again, it's a similar situation where it's hard to get in there even to repair and for sure to renovate because of the condition of how the tenants are keeping their units. We do have to do it, and but it's going to be difficult. If we look at page 30, you can see the hydroponic unit using all the massive electricity consumption. And those, page 34, conditions, second fridges and freezers everywhere. And page 37 shows the plumbing fixtures, and that's the case in a number of suites. More old fridges and freezers. Page 39, you can see it'll be impossible to get in to renovate this suite. These people will have to move probably before we can do that on page 39. Page 44, you can see these are the original cupboards, and they are falling apart. Most of them are like this, exactly like this, and then the original stove in Harvest Gold. We have that once in our house. Page 45, some of the other cupboards are even, I guess they've attempted to upgrade them, but clearly that wasn't the situation.
So like we talked about in the cap rate analysis, we did try to account for this land lease, and it's important to note, we bought in July of 2017, we bought the building portion. And so when we purchased it for $3.425,000, that amounts to about an 8.5% cap rate. So we're not asking for that for the whole building, but it was a market transaction, arm's length, and so that was what the market was willing to pay for that portion of the income stream. So instead of doing, two paths and using really the market cap for that risky stream, we said, okay, we'll take the 5.3%, recognize that a stabilized multifamily asset would be reasonably similar to the land lease payments, and we added 1% to account for that land lease situation. Because to say, oh, we're valuing it as if there isn't a land lease, well, there is a land lease. I mean, you could value it as if it had 2 more stories, as if there was another building, but you have to value it, in our mind, on what actually exists. And what actually exists is a land lease held by a life co with no intention of selling it, and a building lease or a building title that was purchased at market at an 8.5 cap.
And in addition to that, I mean, the property is in disrepair. And so, I mean, we have to look at the cap rate to account for the actual condition of the building. We know that there's at least $2 million to put into this building at this point. If you go to page 47, you can see the statement of adjustments for the purchase of the building improvement, and so it was $3,425,000. And page 50 is the actual rental at purchase. That's all, thank you.
Thank you. Questions of the applicant?
So you plan on renovating suites as they open up?
Yes.
It's a little bit of both. We'll be renovating suites, and we'll be doing, some of the major capital repairs necessitate, en masse, being done all together. Like, you're not going to do the roof, obviously, suite by suite, but yeah, we're renovating. We will be renovating suite by suite.
Okay. So the suites that are vacant now, have you been renovating them?
There are 3 vacancies, and we are planning on renovating them.
But we have.
No, they're not done yet. No work has been done. You can't just go in and renovate it and take the suite to market. It's a process with the tenancies branch.
So.
And with pricing.
Yep.
So I think you said that Canada Life, who owns it, they get the building after the lease expires, right?
Yeah.
And any sort of work you do increases in income and increases in rent. The rent of the land goes up?
Yeah.
Correct.
Is that correct?
The calculation on the land lease,
Goes
there's
up.
there's a
Okay.
rental component.
But rent, not income.
Yeah, they participate in the gross, in, what is it, 30% of the gross income from the
Right.
building.
Okay, so given that they have, I mean, it's obviously, it's good for them if you guys renovate the place, right? And they get more money from you.
Right.
Are they contributing
No.
No,
to any sort of income?
no.
So if it's gonna cost you more once you get rid of it to renovate it, is that why you're doing it slowly? Or, I just don't
So-
understand the idea behind
You-
why you'd get into this kind of situation.
Usually, the rent, or the suite by suite doesn't make sense because you don't get enough of a lift.
To do
because-
the above guideline.
Because and so usually you do building, and then, because if your rents are reasonably close to market, getting to market, because that's what the suite by suite gets you, isn't worthwhile. Here, though, the rents are so far below market that it actually makes sense to do suite by suite, so it is an unusual situation. But really, the reason we're doing it isn't because of the land lease or anything, it's because the rents are so far below market that being able to do a renovation, actually, to get a suite by suite to market is worthwhile. It just usually isn't.
So you guys, pardon me, inspected this property before you purchased it?
We did.
And so are these pictures from the inspection?
They are, yes.
They are. So you've done work since then? Like you looked into this and you saw this, and you've done repairs to this sort of thing?
I don't think
There's,
any of.
no, I mean, some, not in the suites, but like the roof, for example, was done in 2019. Nothing.
Was just finished.
Yeah, exactly. It's all post-reference.
Okay, but we are looking at current condition though.
Well, it's a roof. It had a roof before, it still has roof.
Yeah.
That might bring the expenses down, but it's not gonna change anything else. It's a roof and a roof.
Yeah. They do a pretty good job. All right,
It's Bella Staging is the name of the company.
Bella Staging?
Yeah.
Okay, those are my questions.
Thank
So
you.
you can use that for your briefs.
Ms. Nesbitt?
Yeah, what happens, can you explain this again to me, because I must have missed it. What happens, or how long is the lease, and what happens at the end?
So it's a 99-year lease.
Uh-huh.
So in 1972, the building was built by Winnipeg Construction. Those are the people who owned the building portion of the title. Canada Life owned the land portion of the title.
We think that they couldn't get a mortgage
Yes.
or,
Or this, we think it was a financing scheme, but
Yeah.
who
Okay.
knows? And so.
that's why they entered into that.
Because they also did a
agreement.
mortgage with Canada Life at the
Yeah,
same time.
and so fast forward to 2017, Winnipeg Construction wasn't active anymore. The principals were getting on in age, so they decided they wanted to sell just the building portion because that was all they owned. So that was what we purchased from.
Okay. So it doesn't create any difficulties for you for selling the building down the road?
It absolutely does.
Okay.
Because now even, we're getting closer to that lease expiry, and we
Okay.
don't have any rights to renew kind of in perpetuity. So to the extent that that 99-year lease is coming to an end, our building portion is worth less and less and less, right? Because if you're buying 40 years of income, you'd buy it for less than if you're buying 50.
Yeah. What do you think's gonna happen? Like, could it be renewed? Is there a renewal term? I'm asking, this is speculative, I know.
There's no rights to renew. Our hope when we bought the building is that we could come to a commercial, so Great West Life is Canada Life, with Great West Life, which has turned out not to be the case, despite some initial optimism from their folks that weren't handling the asset. And then we said, could we buy the land? And they said no. So if we're selling what we own, it's worth less than what we bought it for. Because we've now, right, we're getting close to that expiry. Not that close, but the closer you get,
Right,
the
you
less
still
it's
have
worth.
some run left, obviously. Okay, thanks. Clear as mud.
It's for sure a challenging financial arrangement.
And do you know of any other situations in Winnipeg like this? Like,
So
is this
for-
so unique that there's none other? or-
For
Few?
a high-rise multifamily, this is really unique. You could see this, like, we have other properties on land leases, but it would be like, the Tim Hortons we just did at La Jamodier, as an example, is on a land lease, but we've got it's in perpetuity. So even though we're renting it from, call it Petro-Canada, we've got a right to be there pretty much forever, even though it's a land lease. So that this expiry with, the hard date is unusual, at least in my experience. And we own a lot of properties.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes, I had the pleasure of hearing this property previously,
I was
so I
gonna
remember.
say, I saw it on that.
Yeah.
We both heard it.
Yeah.
So it is a very interesting property. So since the last time you presented to us, the only, in terms of the suites, so you've renovated an area that wasn't a suite before and made it
Correct.
into a suite, and then only one of the other suites has been done?
Yeah.
Okay. And there's been no change to the amount of equipment people have in there and
They have that
freezers
right,
and-
at the end of the day, they have a
actually, you
right
mentioned
to
They have a
have
right
it, and
to
we
have
can't
that.
take it away.
Okay. And what's the turnover like in the building? Is it fairly
It's low because
low
the rents are
because
so
of the-
low.
Yeah.
And people have been there for a long time.
And it's older people, a
Yeah,
lot of older
yeah.
people, yeah.
The problem with that is though, as they get older, the building isn't really accessible right now. There's no wheelchair ramp, there's no handicap operators, so it gets to a certain point where they have to leave.
They have to move.
Yeah.
And you are renovating or the plan is to renovate as they're becoming vacant, but you haven't done anything except for the one
That-
suite?
yeah, that one.
Okay, all right. Okay, that's all I had. Thanks.
Just the odd question. On your page 2, you have the total operating costs, which are 58%. But it's the same figure as the city has.
Yeah.
Okay.
So really,
That's okay.
we're arguing rent and cap rate.
Yeah.
And mostly,
So-
it's mostly cap rate.
Yeah,
So
mostly cap rate.
You're 1% premium because of the land lease.
Exactly.
I think that's all I have. So summation on either party?
So, I mean, that pretty much covers it. We're recognizing the property as it is and not as it could be.
All right, so leave it with us, and thanks for coming this morning,
Thanks to you.
and
Olivia.
you'll
Thanks
get
very much.
results very soon.
Thanks.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Oh, yeah, nice to meet you.
Yeah.
We're gonna have you come up, but we're gonna take about a 5-minute recess, but you can come up and set up.
Excellent, thank
Okay.
you so much, Mr. Chair. Quick question, is it okay if I have a laptop open?
I don't see why
For,
not.
issue that I won't be sending emails, I promise.
As long as it's not,
It pertains to, it
It
pertains.
contains my evidence briefs.
Yes.
I mean, I have paper copies as well.
Well, it's the same as somebody coming in with a phone, you know, and we had that the other day too, and speed up things, etc. Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much.
please state your name.
Leslie Van Bruggen?
Do you affirm the evidence you'll present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, thank you.
Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order, and we will go to the next one on the docket, which is 1281 Grant Street. So, Mr. Assessor, whenever you're ready, you can take us through this property.
1281 Grant, file number 19-452, roll number 12015706200. Apartment block, Razat, built 1964, no effective year built on it, 60 outdoor parking spots. We've got 100 suites, 8 bachelors, 74 one-bedrooms, and 18, pardon me, 2-bedrooms. So if you go to page 2, you'll see that they've been good in handing in their mailers. Page 3 shows our model-generated assessment. Pardon me, 918.76 on the average monthly rent as per the model. With model vacancy rate, expense ratio, and cap as per age, size, and area. It comes up to the estimated market value, $10,359,000. If you go to page 4, you'll see our rent comparables. So our rent comparables, they are higher than the subject property. They're all on Grant in terms of average monthly rent per unit. It is important to note that the subject does have 8 bachelors. Other than comparable 2 and 3, they don't have bachelors, and those ones 2 and 3 only have 1 bachelor suite. You typically go for less. Our rent's lower than the subject properties. Same streets, same age, same construction class. If you go to page 5, I looked at the income and expense. Most recent one, year ending December 31st, 2017, the full year on page 9. So I looked at it, and I looked at the total income. They said they collected after vacancy $1,165,000. We're at $1,102,000, so I think we're good to go there. Expenses. So for the expenses, if you go to page 9, you'll see that the actual expenses they are reporting don't line up with what I've included, because if you're on page 9 right now, you'll see that I've started off some items ticked off that shouldn't be there. Namely, there's a refurbishment line of $136,443. That appears to be capital expenditures, given the amount of that, and it's described as refurbishment. I excluded it. Bathroom refurbishment, I excluded that. Equipment replacement and interest I've excluded as well. Everything else I've included that should be included. plus the additional expenses which they indicated on page 10. I've also included that. So if you go to my page 5, you'll see the applicably included R&M. Those are in yellow. Blinds, doors, windows, equipment repair, electrical, plumbing, supplies, elevator repairs, roof, exterior, grounds, parking lot, cleaning supplies, painting, carpet cleaning, vinyl plank flooring, vinyl flooring, given the size of the building. They included that, cover replacement, and some general R&M. It comes out to $1,645 a unit, which is at the higher end. If we were to throw the refurbishment on that, it would double, roughly double the R&M, bring it up to 3,000 a year. This is not what we typically see. It'd be triple what the highest R&M analysis cap rate study is. So doing a calculation, just running the applicably included R&M comes up with a net operating income based on calculating what their actuals they reported of $548,430. Our model NOI is $549,000, so pretty much exactly on their management. In blue, I don't know if I bumped it, but I adjusted it to 5% of their effective gross income as per tradition, and it looks like we're right on this one. Pictures of the property can be found on page 13 going forward, and what we're looking at here, looks like we're looking at some of this refurbishment in terms of kitchens, the general property, what we're seeing. So capital expenditures removed were within $1,000 of the model NOI cap rate. Again, page 7 is our chart. Our cap rate sales, it looks like I did not forgot to put in because it's an addition, but we do have sales like we saw in the last brief to substantiate the model generated cap rate, which was applied to this property in terms of age, area, and size. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of the assessor?
Excellent, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So quick question on, if you will, everyone will turn to page 4 with me. First question being, so you provide for comparables here with higher rents.
Mm-hmm.
What am I supposed to get from that?
Well, we got 4 properties that are nearby your property that are the similar, effective year built. They are not low-rise properties. It's the surrounding market. They're meant to substantiate the rent.
Okay, so again, if I'm looking at this, it looks like our property is underperforming.
Well, what I did is I looked at your actuals, and it looks like we are a bit low in terms of what the model is applying. Now, again, I don't know, I have the most recent full year prior to the reference date in terms of income and expenses. You know, we're dealing with current condition. There could be some more refurbishment beyond December 2017.
Do you know what the vacancy has been for this property the last couple of years? Do you know if
Like
it's,
the past,
2017, prior to that, 2018? Again, I understand, 2018, but do you know if it's been the 1.8% or if it's been higher than that?
well, looking at your mailer on my page 7, it looks like there's a vacancy expense of 6.4%, but when I look down at your expenses, you've got refurbishment of $136,443. To do that work, people can't be living there, so it looks like those would be tied together.
All right. I'm not going to focus too much on it, but if we'll turn to page 4, the board will turn to page 4 and assess with me. Or sorry, 7, I apologize. For the capitalization rates. Just for some clarification here, if you will. So, and again, I apologize if these are simplistic questions. I see that you got City of Winnipeg, Collier, Seabury, and Cushman and Wakefield. For the City of Winnipeg, the capitalization rates of 4 and 7.3. For your capitalization rates, are they calculated using the actual or the model rents when you come up with those capitalization rates? Do you know?
We use modeled rents. We use the rents that are submitted to us. On income and expense statements.
Right, but like, again, so when when the city of Winnipeg calculates the capitalization rate for properties, are you using the actual rents to calculate your capitalization rates? Or are you using your model rents that are generated from your model to calculate your capitalization rate?
The model rents, but the model rents are generated by the actuals.
Okay, but the model is what you use to determine the net operating income for each property, and then that in turn helps determine what that capitalization.
Yeah, using the actual sales.
Fair enough. All right, fair enough. I think that concludes my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Nesbitt,
I have no questions.
Ms. Stevens.
I do not either, thank you.
I have none either, so the floor is yours, sir.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. If the board will turn with me to page 3, just to give, what I like to do when I'm presenting is I like to kind of give a high-level view of what we're going to be talking about, just to give the board a sense of where we're going, and then we'll get down to the nitty-gritty. Page 3, under issues, we've got 2 issues. The first is the vacancy rate, and the second is the expense ratio. Somewhat tied together, and I'll explain to you why as we go through it, but we'll get started there, just kind of setting the bar of how we're going. So the property is 1964 year construction, 100 rental units, and the income approach was used to derive the 2021 assessment. Page 4, we have the current assessments. This was provided by the owner to us. This is from the City of Winnipeg's website, just outlining how that income was derived. Page 6, we have our value request. So we have the assessed income, the assessed parameters on one side and the actuals on the other. We outline there what the vacancy allowance is, what the gross effective income is, expense ratios, whatnot, and result in an estimated market value request of 8.37 million. Point 7, page 7, we have a location. So this is using the City of Winnipeg's assessment map. Oh, and I apologize, I'm a bit of a fast talker. So if I'm going too fast, please slow me down.
You're doing fine.
All right. Page 7, so this is taken from the City of Winnipeg's assessment website, just outlining where that property is. So the property is highlighted in red there, located on a grant. Page 9 is page 8 is courtesy of Google Maps, the satellite option. So again, just outlining where that property is. You can see it at 1281 Grant Avenue, located there. Page 9 are some exterior pictures of the property. Page 10, we have the valuation. So what we have on page 10 is we have the 2017 income for this particular property. We have the revenue, the vacancy. Vacancy was taken at 3% of that property. The expenses related to that property and the net income. Now, in regards to some of the expenditures that have been put on the property, in talking to the property owner, one of the things that been indicated they've been challenged with this property is dealing with vacancy. So there's been a higher than typical vacancy in this property for the last little bit. So again, part of the reason that they've been looking at putting some of the money into the property is just trying to address trying to make it more attractive. Now, whether or not that's going to work, it's difficult to say, but at that time of the valuation, we were at a 3% vacancy, and that's kind of why they are spending some money on this property for refurbishments. The other thing, and again, through conversations, is when you have a property that's 100 years old, or not 100 years old, 100 units, 100 units, as you have turnover, you have people moving out, you just naturally have to spend some money on units to bring them back. It's, just a typical way that these things are done. Page 11 is the capitalization rate. So we've looked at sales, we've identified 4 sales that we feel would be reasonable. And we've determined that the capitalization rate at 5.3% is valid, so we don't have an issue with that. Page 12 is the conclusion. So again, M&P has considered the income value of the subject property. We determined that the vacancy has been underassessed at 1.8% and should be closer to 3.22%. The expenses have been underassessed at 49.29% and should be closer to 61.69%. The result of the increased vacancy and expenses is an net operating income of $443,611, capitalized at a cap rate of 5.3%, results in a requested value of $8,370,000. That's truncated. If the board turns to me, page 15 is some supporting documentation. So page 15, we have the information, the income and expense statement, so ending December 31st, 2018, realizing that this is after the valuation date. We can see that the last year, which would be 2017, is identified on the left-hand side, right beside the variance. You can see there's, in terms of vacancy, $38,585 of vacancy expense in the property. And if you actually look in the prior year, so this would be 2018, we see that actually hasn't improved, and that's actually gone up. There's $63,031 worth of vacancy. Again, I realize that that is after the valuation date, but just to give the board a sense of what this property is dealing with and why they're doing what they're doing. Page 17, continuing on until page 33 is the rent roll for the property. The information's there, you know, in looking at it, we may have, anyway. Page 35 is the assessment document for the particular property. So this was taken from the City of Winnipeg's website. You can see that the property was assessed for last assessment cycle at $9,779,000. And for this assessment cycle has been assessed at $10,359,000. Following that, pages 38 and to the end of the page 41 are just supporting documentation. So the notice of hearing as well as assessment notice for that particular property. With that, I conclude my presentation. I welcome any questions from either the board or from the city. Thank you.
I thank you. Questions of the appellant?
So, looking at your page 6, or modeled versus your actual. So it looks like on the income side, you're higher than us. And then it seems like we agree on cap, so expenses, it looks like the difference. When you calculated your expenses on page 15,
Yep.
there's some refurbishment that was done to this property in terms of, they spent $136,443 on just straight refurbishment, and then they spent another 10 on bathroom refurbishment, 16,000 on windows and doors. Would you agree that this level of refurbishment, given the interior condition of the property, constitutes capital expenditure?
It's hard to say. It depends. I'll be honest. When we were looking at this, I didn't get a specific breakdown in terms of what the refurbishment all entailed. The information that I have is when I was talking to the owner, I did bring up some of the money that was being spent, and they did indicate the reason they were spending is they were struggling with some vacancy rate issues, and that's why they were spending this money to try to offset that. And it doesn't look like it was working, at least in the short term for 2018. You actually see vacancy going up. Time will tell.
I think as they're renovating the suites, that would be tied to the higher than normal vacancy?
No, so again, talking to the owner, the reason for the vacancy isn't necessarily in relation to the renovations, but rather the renovations are in relation to the vacancy. So it's more the other way around. That's why they are spending that money, to try to update the suites and try to make it try to get them more people in, get it more enticing to the market.
So, including the refurbishments into the R&M, it would boost the R&M over 3,000 per unit. In your opinion, is this what buildings over the long term typically operate at on a per unit basis in terms of repair and maintenance?
It depends on the market. It really does. And again, I can't speak specifically for this property. We've only represented it for a year, and I've only had the conversations with the owners. So, but what I can speak to is my experience with other multifamily properties. So it really does depend on what the demands are in the market. So in markets where tastes are shifting, and depending on the amount of stuff that's coming online, again, there's that expectation that properties are updated to remain relevant, I guess, for lack of a better word. So, For sure, 3,000 a unit would be high. Would it be that all the time? Again, I couldn't say for sure.
Have they been, because we're looking at current condition, have they continued to renovate properties, kitchens and bathrooms since then? So like a greater percentage would be renovated today than there were December of 2017?
Yeah, so again, they're still spending money trying to update these units to make them more enticing to the market.
Those are my questions, thank you.
I thank you, Ms. Nesbitt.
So you presented us 1 year, essentially, worth of data.
Yep.
Did you look at this on a multi-year level and stabilize it to see if there's anything that's really out of whack that maybe, 1 year it's really high, next year it's really low?
No, so again, the information that we had, I just followed up with a conversation with the owner to find out what was going on, because again, I looked at it and I was like, oh boy, they're spending some money here, trying to get a sense of what's going on, and that was, and I had also noticed the vacancy and asking what was driving that. So the information that I presented was purely from the owner. I haven't done a stabilized vacancy, and I haven't done a stabilized rent for this particular property, no.
Okay, and you indicated you had no issue with the cap at all, you're in agreement with the assessment?
I don't have an issue with a 5.3 cap on this particular property.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens?
Yeah, that was similar. I had the same question about stabilization and only seeing 1 year here. Because was this, you've shown us the assessed value previous at 9,779,000. Was that appealed?
I'm not sure. I'll be perfectly honest. I think the assessor might be the better.
Because what I'm wondering is that something significantly changed in the property in the last, is this chronic, what sounds like maybe could be potentially a chronic vacancy, something that was going on years previous and you're not sure?
Unfortunately, I apologize. This is my first year representing the property.
Okay.
So if it was appealed in prior year, I'm not sure. I apologize.
So if the vacancies are driving the renovations, nonetheless, when the renovations are occurring, that could leave the suites vacant longer, correct?
Yeah, there is that potential. Again, I'm not sure what the timeline is on turnaround of these things. Although typically when as you have more suites available, it's less likely. If the vacancy was tight, then it'd be more likely that the renovations would be helping contribute to the vacancy. But as you have more suites available, typically turnaround, you have some available suites as people want to move in. So it becomes less of an issue. Again, that's my experience speaking in terms of what I've seen in the past.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Just a couple little questions. It's an older building. It's built in 1964. You have no problem with the cap rate. The expenses run a little high in regards to percentage-wise.
Right.
Okay. So, and I'm just looking at your income on 5-2 on your page, 5-2 income, and I just noticed repairs and maintenance are $336,000, $574. So, do you know what that is, or?
Yeah. So to be perfectly honest, what I did is the information on page 15 I consolidated. So I took what I deemed to be repairs and maintenance, and I lumped those together to come up with that value.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what exactly, I know one building had a problem with the balconies. Is this the property? Do you know?
I'll be honest, I don't know.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you. I'm sorry.
Because I know, they changed, all the balconies were sinking
Yeah.
on the front there, and they renovated the whole thing, so it almost, but I don't know the address.
You know what, and I apologize. It didn't come up with a conversation with the owner, so I can't say.
And this is your first year in, doing this for your clients?
This is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I apologize. If it was addressed in prior years, I'm not aware of it.
So, normally, when you look at apartment buildings, What do older buildings run? I mean, everybody manages them a little differently, but the expense ratio runs around the same,
Right.
except when they do other renovations.
Yeah.
So, it's quite high.
Yeah, so I'll be honest, if I'm looking at a building, if I'm looking at an apartment building, I'd probably be expecting expense ratio, somewhere in the 50 to 55% range would be kind of what I would anticipate, unless there's something else going on within that property, unless you're dealing with some renovations, refurbishment, unless you're dealing with some vacancy issues, and you're trying to turn a property around. That would be based on my experience. That would be probably what I'd be benchmarking at.
Okay. So, for the record, you're seeking the 8,370,000.
That is correct.
Okay. Summation, either party?
I think this is a good example of, we've got a 62% expense ratio on this and R&M north of $3,000. That shows rentals have been done. It's been outlined. I think it supports it.
Anything further?
Again, we're looking at this. You can look at it two ways. One, that the money has to be spent. They're dealing with some vacancy issues, and that's why they're spending the money, is to try to address that.
Okay. We'll go on to the next property, which is Kimberly, 739 Kimberly, whenever you're ready. Barocas.
I'll spell it out phonetically for you.
You know something? I've tried so many times.
It's okay.
Mr. Barocas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
The floor is yours, sir.
19451. File number, roll number 02061421600739 Kimberly Avenue. April 1st, 18 reference date for the 2020 rolls. Assessed value is $6,253,000. Actual year built, 1979. Effective year built, 1979. 57 suites, 74 outdoor parking spots on this one. Construction class C masonry bearing walls. Did a good handing in the mailers, it's evidence on page 2. Page 3 is our model summary, model parameters. It comes to a net operating income of $312,000. Cap is done by Agent Aerial. Size as per usual. Our cap rate chart and sales are found on page 6A and page 7. Just examples in the neighborhood to corroborate the model. These cap rates were calculated on page 6A using the actual income and expenses we received from the property. So it's how they're actually running, and then that's what the most recent expenses were leading up to the time of purchase. So those cap rates were calculated based on the actual. So I think in the interest of saving some time, our net income is actually less than the balance.
Thank you.
So I think predominantly this one is going to be a cap rate issue on this one. Our rent comps are on page 4. They bracket the subject property. They're in the area, similar in terms of year built. Our income, 607. Gross potential in 2017 found on page 5 is within $8,000 of what the model is cranking out. And again, applicably included R&M is in yellow, like I did for the last property. There was some refurbishment, interest, equipment replacement that I removed. This, there's much less to remove in this instance. It wasn't in the 136,000 range. So This is predominantly a cap rate issue. I included the additional expenses indicated on page 10 on page 11. Photographs of the property, page 12 onward, just showing the condition of the property. It's basic. We don't have an effective age on it or anything like that. So I think it's predominantly a cap rate issue on this one. That's my evidence.
You're cheating a little. Questions of the assessor?
I don't know, how can we trust these pictures? Anyway, sorry. So quick question, if we can move to, so starting on page 7. So how would you so you've got, for multifamily properties, you have high-rise, low-rise, low-rise A, low-rise B. How would you classify this property?
This property? Well, they all have the same ranges. Some sort of low-rise.
Would you say low-rise A, low-rise B?
Well, it's not in a bad area, but it's not in like a, the hottest part of town. Maybe low-rise A/B.
So I guess that brings my next question. So again, I'm looking at, so it looks like City of Winnipeg's using a low of 4 and a high of 7.3. But yet when I look at market reports, I'm seeing CBRE, they're saying 5.5 to 6 for A and 5.75 to 6 for B. Again, how do you reconcile that when the market report's suggesting that it's, quite a bit higher than what you've got it assessed at?
We have access to all the income and expense mailers. I don't know if those outfits do. So I'd say we've got a lot of information going into our model.
Go into page 6. Turn back to page 6. You've got 4 sales here. Now, when I asked you the last hearing, you'd indicated that the information that we have on page 7 is generated from the model. Is this information that we see for these 4 properties generated from the model? Or is this actuals?
These are actuals.
These are actuals. Okay, I guess that brings my next question. So when I'm looking at, so for example, 191 Roach Street, if I'm working backwards, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I take the capitalization rate and I multiply it by the sale price, and that's going to get me what my NOI is for that. Is that correct? Would that be, as we work backwards on that?
NOI over cap equals sale. So yeah. Sale price times cap equals the NOI.
Okay, so then if we're using a 2% vacancy rate and what, a 50% op cost, that seem reasonable?
Well, it's based on the actuals they reported, so it's not based on market parameters. It's just all based on what they actually reported.
Right. So, but again, if I'm using a 2%, so I guess where I'm going with this, if I'm using a 2% vacancy and a 50% op cost, I'm getting a typical net rent of about $825 a month, give or take. But what gives me pause for concern is when I look at this area, and if I'm looking at Roche, this is in East Kildonan, I'm seeing that the CMHC is saying that average rents in the area are about $944 a square foot, or $944 a unit. Again, it's a bit of a difference there.
These are examples based on the actuals, based on the actual sale price, their income, their expenses, 3 years of calculated stabilized expenses. An investor looking to buy a property would look at how the individual property is performing in terms of coming up with a cap rate to formulate their sale price. They wouldn't just look at what CMHC is saying. I think the subject property's actuals are a better indication.
Okay. All right. The last question I have is, we're looking at a property that's 1979, so we're a couple years old there. This property in question, 191 Roche, is 1971. So a few years old. 4% cap on that? Does that ring true with what your experience has been in looking at properties in Winnipeg. Is that typical?
That's what they purchased it for. Typical? Well, I mean, if it's older, say 1971, and we're looking at what here? We're looking at so very similar. Sometimes people purchase these properties and they see a real big upside in terms of being able to renovate them and getting an above RTB increase. The intention of the purchaser can vary, but with these types of properties, looking at the picture, I would say that it looks like it's got definite renovation upside to it.
So when you look at, if you're looking at a property, for example, 191 Roche, and you think that it's purchased, if it's and there's a possibility it's purchased for a renovation upside, do you make any adjustments in your model? Do you do anything, or do you just roll that out?
Well, no, I mean, it's, the cap rate is calculated based on the actual income leading up. Now, if it was purchased for renovation, the actual income leading up to it may indicate a lower cap rate, but that's still the cap rate that they purchased it on, based on the condition of the property and the relative income and expenses leading up to that point.
Right, okay. Is that reasonable to apply something where someone's buying it with the intention of increasing income at a certain cap rate and applying that to properties where that's not the case?
Well, first of all, our cap rates are derived from the model using income expenses and sales. These are just examples. We find a lot of the time we ask them to declare what cap rate they purchased the property on, and it's around this. It's often lower than what we have it in at the model.
Okay, so what do you know what the model has for a cap rate for 191 Roche based on the model parameters?
No, I don't. I
Okay.
don't have that here.
All right. I think that concludes my questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Nesbitt,
I have no question.
Ms. Stevens.
No questions?
I don't think I have either, so floor is yours, sir.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. If the board will move with me to page 3 of my brief. So, as was correctly surmised by the assessor, the issue that we have before the board really is capitalization rate, or we can look at this based on sales too. So, I mean, there's a couple of different ways we can look at this. If the board turns with me to page 4 and 5, this is the current assessment for the property, which has been provided by the City of Calgary to the owner. I'm just showing the assessment parameters which were utilized. You can see a 5% capitalization rate has been used for this property. Page 6, we have the income valuation. So again, there's really, at the end of the day, when we look at what the income is, net income, it's pretty similar. There's not much difference. Really, the issue before the board really is one of capitalization rate. That's the question we're looking at. Based on a capitalization rate of 6.2% or 6.19 if we're going to be exact, we're looking at a market value of $5,567,864. You guys truncate to the nearest thousand and nearest hundred?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, does the city of Winnipeg truncate to the nearest 1,000 or 100?
1,000.
1,000? Okay, all right, yeah, so we would be looking at 5,568,000. Sorry, I just wasn't sure. Page 7 is a location of this particular property within the city of Winnipeg. This is taken from the city assessment map. Property is located in East Kildonan. Page 8, we have a site map. Again, just outlining where that particular property is located at 739 Kimberley. This is courtesy of Google Maps. Page 9 is just some exterior photos of that property. And page 10, we have the income valuation. So 5.2 just shows the 2018 and 2017 revenue for the particular property, the expenses, NOI, whatnot. Page 11 is when we get to the capitalization rate. So the challenge that we face is the fact that we actually don't have access to the income information for these particular properties. Property owners are a little reluctant to give it, or pretty reluctant to share it around, and I've done both a Freedom of Information request for the City of Winnipeg, and they decided not to provide that information to me. Also through various other discussions in terms of finding out if it's possible to get the information, I was informed that no, it would not be possible to get that information unless we were the property owner. So, how do we look at this property and try to determine if that capitalization rate's right? Well, so what we did is we looked using CMHC typical rents for the area. So so we've got 4 properties here. These properties are located all in the Zone 7 of the CMHC area, which is East Kildonan. CMHC identifies a rent of about $944 a month, 2% vacancy rate, and we're using a 50% expense ratio. So if the board flips with me briefly, keep your finger on that page, and if the board will flip with me to starting on page 45. You can flip to page 45 of my brief. This is housing market information from CMHC. And if we go to page within that, you can see the areas that as CMHC identifies on page 46 and 47. And then finally on page 50, they have the information here. So you can see when it comes to 1 bedrooms within in East Kildonan, we're going to assume they're typically 1 bedrooms. You can see it's 1.7% vacancy rate. And if you look at 1 bedroom rental rates, you can see $944 per unit. So that would be Zone 7. So again, lacking the information from the city of Winnipeg or from the owners to be able to look at this, what we've used typical rents for the area for these particular properties. We've then taken the $944 per month, multiplied it by 12, multiplied by the number of units, adjusted it by 2% for vacancy, taken a 50% expenses off, and that gives us our estimated net operating incomes for these particular properties. You can see here that these net operating, for example, 111 Strathcona, you can see that we've got an estimated NOI of $394,101 on that. Now to calculate what the capitalization rate is, we take that estimated NOI, divide it by the sale price, and we get a capitalization rate of 5.88%. We've done the same for each one of these 4 sales, and we end up with capitalization rates ranging from 5.38% to 7.76%. Taking an average of that, we get to 6.19. Now, the reason I was asking the city how they arrived at their values is we can see, if you look just purely coincidental, some of those sales that the city is actually using in theirs are some sales that we use in ours. So for example, 191 Roche Street, you can see that the city is calculating a 4.84% capitalization rate. Using typicals for the area, and actually it looks like we're 1 suite light, we get a capitalization rate of 5.38%. That's using $944 rents. If you look at 285 Maxwell Place, you can see that the city of Winnipeg is calculating a 4.4% capitalization rate. We're calculating a 5.74% capitalization rate using that. A quick search, and again, realizing that this is not the most scientific method on the face of the planet, but doing a quick search of the internets for rental activity, we can see that 285 Maxwell is advertised by Ackland Properties with units of $966 asking rent for 1 bedrooms, $1,058 for 2 bedrooms, and we can look at 394 Talbot. So this is one of this used by the city, and when we look, we can see that's being advertised by Asteroid Management for 1 bedrooms at $800 and 2 bedrooms for $900. So again, when we look at those rents, they're falling pretty closely in line with what we see reported by CMHC. So looking at this information, this really does bring question to whether that 5% capitalization rate being used by the city of Winnipeg to assess this particular property is right. If the board will turn with me to the next page, this is page 12. So the next aspect we've looked at, and again, realizing that it's difficult when we don't have the rental rates in front of us. But what we can look at pretty easily is the sales. So what we've done is we've looked at the 4 properties, we've taken their sale price and we've divided them by the number of units within the building to get us our sale price per unit. And we've compared that to the subject property. So again, understanding that there's various things with suite mix, but to account for that, we've looked at the average suite size within the building. So we've taken the building area divided by the suites to give us our average suite size. When we look at these 4 sales, we see these properties sold for values between $71,500 and $103,000. An average of $91,000 and a median of $95,000 per suite. We look at the subject property. Subject property has been assessed at $109,000 per suite. So again, another metric that we can use when looking at the value of this property is to say, okay, what are other properties in the area selling for on a per suite basis? We don't have to worry about what the income parameters used are. They're all in the same area. They're all roughly the same year of construction. They have roughly the average similar suite size. And what we can see when we look at that is we can see that the 4 sales we feel are most comparable are really selling for rates that are quite a bit lower than what we've been assessed at. So again, looking at the median and average sale prices, M&P would calculate the value of the subject property to be between 5.212 million and 5.446 million. So again, just another way to look at this property to determine, does it make sense? Page 13, we have a map of the sales. So we've just identified the sales that we've utilized in where they're located, compared to the subject property. You can see the subject property there is the red pin at 739 Kimberley, and you can see the other 4 sales are actually in fairly close proximity to the subject property. Page 14, we have some exterior photos of the property. So page 14, 15, 16, and 17 are just exterior photos of that property, or of those comparable properties. Page 18, we have the conclusion. So again, M&P has considered 2 approaches to value when looking at the property. The first approach is to value the property using the income approach, and using a capitalization rate. We come to one value there. Give me a second here. Did I change my capitalization rate on that a little bit? So yeah, it should be say 6.19%. I apologize. Resulting in a valuation of $5,567,864. The second approach is to use the sales comparison approach. Using this, we get values that are from 5.2 million to 5.4 million. So again, looking at this information, M&P feels that a value of 5.4465 million is pretty reasonable for the property based on what we're looking at. So looking at the income, looking at the sales, trying to reconcile them together to determine whether or not the valuation of this property is right. And again, based on that information, we just feel that that property looks like it's been overvalued based on that information. Page 21 and 22 is the income and expense statement. Starting on page 23, going on until page 32 is the rent roll. Page 34 is the assessment for this property. Just interesting to note, the last assessment cycle, the value was 5.773 million on it. For this assessment cycle, it's 6.253 million on it. Page 35 and to page 38 are just the information for each one of the comparable properties utilized. Starting on page 39, we have the sales support. So we've used the Johnson report for the sales support. On page 41, you can find 3 of the sales utilized: 191 Roche, 111 Strathcona, 436 Talbot, and if you go to page 43, we have the last sale at 285 Maxwell. So again, purpose of this is just to provide the information to the board, to the number of suites that that were utilized, the age, the sale date, and the sale price for each one of those properties. As mentioned, starting on page 45, moving until page 54 is the market report, the CMHC market report, and then following that, starting on page 59, starting on page 57 till the end, are the assessment notice and the notice of hearing. With that, I conclude my presentation. I welcome any questions from the board or from the assessors. Thank you.
Thank you. Matthew?
Okay, so if you go to your page 11,
You bet.
you've got your cap rate. So you didn't have access to the income and expenses, so you subbed in the CMHC average rents for one bedroom and other CMHC parameters, correct?
Yeah, so again, looking at that, looking at the area and using the information, the typicals from CMHC, we felt that was the best way to determine what that is. CMHC gathers rents from a number of these properties to determine what that typical is within the area, so we felt that would probably be the best way to do this.
So, say you were purchasing the building and you had access to the actual income and expenses, and these buildings are purchased based on their ability to produce income. Would you, instead of you looking at the actual, still sub in the CMHC figures and coming to determine a cap rate?
Well, it's certainly come into consideration. So one of the factors when buying a property is you're going to be looking at what the market's generating, as well as what your property's generating. When you're buying an asset, and I mean, typically as this goes, you're not buying it for what it is generating, you're buying it for what the future generation potential of that is. So I would say that certainly when buying an asset, I would have an eye to what the market would be, what's going on in the market when I'm buying that property.
If you go to your page 12 and 13, we have 3 properties here in Chalmers, and one in Rossmere A. Looking at the map on page 13, so the properties on the Chalmers neighborhood, that's like Elmwood type area. Would you consider that to be in the same character as Valley Gardens where the subject property sits?
I mean, again, problem with when you come to sales is you're stuck with what you have. So, while I don't think they're exactly the same, they are within a similar region within the city, and they're the best comparables that we have when looking at these particular properties. Again, when we're coming down to market value, it's, you've always got to make judgment calls in terms of where you're going to carve off, what's more comparable, how do you look at that. So in this area, what we prioritized was we looked at age of the property, we looked at the average suite size, and we looked at the area that those properties were in, and tried to reconcile those 3 criteria and end up with the best comparables we could possibly have. So are they exactly the same? No. Are they the best comparables that we could come up with in terms of the area? Yes.
If you had the actual income and expenses for the properties in your cap rate study, would you use them instead of the CMHC substituted figures?
We'd certainly take a look at them and take them into consideration. Would we, again, when purchasing a property, there's a lot of factors at play that would have to be come into consideration. As you indicated before, what's the reason for your buy, why you're buying it, what are your motivations, these sort of things. But yeah, we would certainly be looking at both the income of the property as well as what the market is showing.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Nesbitt?
I have no questions, thank you.
Ms. Stevens?
No, I'm good too, thank you.
I just have a couple questions. You've developed a cap rate here on your 5.3 cap rate, page 11. So I'm just trying to pick out one that is probably similar to the subject. So would you say that Stadacona is probably similar in regards to, possible, age-wise and, suite-wise? We don't know the breakdown in regards to, but,
Yeah.
it comes in at, say, for simplicity, 5.75 or 5.9 or 6%. So, but you've come along and you've used the average.
Yep.
Okay. So you feel as if the average is warranted, or can you, sort of pick a cap rate? I know one sale doesn't make a market, but it points you in the right direction.
For sure. So I mean, realistically, I think looking at the properties, I agree. I'd probably say that when you look at Strathcona, you're 71 suites, so you're a little bit larger compared to the other properties. 65. You're not exact. The subject property is a little bit newer, but it's not too far off. You look at the average suite size. The subject property is 816 square feet. The average suite size is 862, so that would be pretty similar. Sale date is pretty bang on to the valuation date there. So it would be that would be certainly a good indicator to use when looking at it when trying to determine a value for sure. And then again, when you look at the value per unit, the building's selling for about $94,366 per unit, which, I mean, again, we don't know the suite mix, but we can take a guess looking at the average suite size, and that would be probably, it's pretty close to the subject property. I'd probably say it's a pretty good indicator.
So you did look at the, almost like the direct sales comparison approach on your other page there.
For sure. And the reason we did that is we understand that, again, it can be a little challenging. If we have some sales that we can look at, it's sometimes.
But like you say, basically they're sold on the income approach.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
And
but
we
it's nice to compare.
Yeah. And again, I think what we have to keep in mind at the end of the day is really, what does that look like in terms of where our value is? So the other thing is, and I don't know, and maybe this is more of a summary thing, so I'll leave it for summary.
Okay. Summation, if you want.
Do I go first as assessor? Does it matter?
You normally go first.
Okay, all right. So again, when we're looking at the property, and again, our contention really is the capitalization rate issue. That's our concern. The city's using a 5% capitalization rate. When you look at the market reports and the city's evidence, and you look on page 7, you can see that Colliers and CBRE, they're saying 5.5 to 7 to 5.75 on these sort of assets. When we look at the information that we've provided to the board, and you can find this on page 11, we're getting capitalization rates ranging from 5.38 to 7.76. We're an average at 6.2. And then finally, when you look at the sale price per unit, understanding that these things are purchased by the income, we're seeing that these properties are selling, anywhere between 10 to 15% less than where we're sitting right now. So again, when we consider each one of those factors, we really do feel that the property's been overassessed, and the reason for that overassessment is due to that capitalization rate that's being utilized, and that capitalization rate does need to be increased. So with that, M&P is respectfully requesting the board to increase that capitalization rate as requested. Thank you very much.
I thank you. I was mistaken. Normally the assessor would go first and you would go last.
Oh, okay, sorry. Sorry, I jumped the gun there, Matt.
It's okay.
So, you may proceed.
The sales, the appellant used for the same sales other than one. Our cap rates are generated based on their actual income and expenses, not based on market averages. So a purchaser purchasing this property looked at the actuals. I believe they have support for our cap rates. Thank you.
Thank you. I think under the normal circumstances, how about if we just roll right along and just continue? Is that okay?
Yes, but I will need the bathroom.
Okay. Okay, we'll do one more and then we'll have a 5-minute recess. So we'll go to number 5 on the docket, which is 455 Agnes Street.
Thank you.
So whenever you're ready. Just let me know. Just let me know.
Me too. I can barely even hold my pen, my hands are so cold.
It is cold in here.
It's really cold
Freezing
here.
in here.
Do a little jumping
Well, at
jacks.
least it's keeping us all awake.
Little calisthenics.
That it is, yeah.
I find it's when when it's really warm, that's when it's brutal.
Okay. File 19-652, roll number 130401089000455 Agnes Street. 2020, April 1st, 18 records dated 1,361,000. It's an apartment. Res out, actual year built 1926, 1945. 20 suites, 6 outdoor parking spots, wood or steel frame exterior walls. Page 2 shows the handing in their mailers. Page 3 shows our model breakdown on this property. 6.6 cap as per age and area comes out to the rounded value. Page 4, rent comparables. They are similar vintage in the area. They are construction class C, ours is construction class D. The rents are in excess of the subject property. 21 bedroom units. The other properties have 2 bedroom units, so that would definitely explain why their rents are higher. Cap rate, as discussed, examples are on page 4A and page 5. You'll see the income and expense statement, most recent one on page 7. Net operating income at 88,723. We've got net operating income of 89,817. Highly similar to the appellant's, again, jumping ahead, cap rate argument. Page 12 shows that there's been some extensive work done. There's a permit from 2014, complete refresh, electrical plumbing, window replacement, etc. And then the rest of the pictures, the rest of the pages are just pictures of the place. So it's an older building, but it's been fixed up, hence the effective age that's been applied to it. Looking at cap here again, that's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of the assessor?
All right. So just, we can turn to page 4. I apologize, you're gonna have to walk me through this a little bit. So when we look at these units, we got 21 bedroom units, and then each one of these properties is a mix between 1, 2, 3, and actually one's got 4 bedroom units, 2 4-bedroom units. Wow. So what is this showing here? It's because you got a pretty big mix there. You're obviously going to generate more rents from 2 and 3 and 4 bedroom units. Mm-hmm. So what's my takeaway from this?
The rents are higher, and that's because of the bedroom count.
Okay, so where does that put us in terms of this property?
We're below the average monthly rents of the properties with bigger units with more bedrooms, which get more money for rent.
Okay. All right. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to, I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure what I'm supposed to take from that, but okay, that sounds okay to me. I agree. And I might have missed it. Do you have any sales that are located within this area that are in your package to support a capitalization rate for this area?
No, we do it based on model, based on the income and expenses that get submitted to us.
All right, but you don't have any sales to support a 6.5 or a 6.6 capitalization?
No, but this is just an example of how we're not using this. We're not just saying the cap goes from 4 to 5. It's on Agnes Street. Tougher area. It's older. It gets a higher cap rate.
So, all right, then if we can go to page 4, you're saying that this is a sample to show the accuracy of your model. How does it show the accuracy of your model?
Well, we have cap rates go from 4.4, so it goes from 4 all the way up to 7. So this is representing, I guess, some sales that occurred more in the middle of that number. Again, there's been sales in Winnipeg that have higher caps, there's sales that have lower caps, there's sales that are below 4%, but we haven't shown those in as examples. It's done by model. This is just to substantiate what the model is calculating.
So how does it substantiate the model? Maybe that's what I'm not understanding.
Well, it falls within the range of what we're saying, based on the actual income and expenses.
Okay. How many sales happen in Winnipeg that you look at or in your model, do you know?
Not part of the modeling process.
Okay, all right, fair enough. I think that concludes my questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Nesbitt?
Does the assessment department give a premium on the cap rate for this market region?
Market Region 7, not this time around. Market Region 4 has it,
Okay.
but this one does not. We have 1945 and earlier, gets the 6.6. We have an effective age on this property of 1945.
Okay.
If you look at the pictures of the property at the end of my brief, they've done, as the permit says, a complete refresh. It looks later than 1945, but again, it has an older foundation and whatnot. So it doesn't have the premium, but keep in mind, we're sitting like right at the limit. It could probably maybe be bumped,
Yeah.
but
But you put it into that lowest.
it's got 1945, so it's in the lower one. It's got the same cap rate as an unrenovated older building in that area.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, that's all I needed to.
And that's the same question I had, so I'm good, thank you.
I just have one question, and that is, there's a work permit or a permit taken out for about $400,000, so, and that was probably for the total renovation that happened in, when, do you know, offhand?
The date says
14, eh?
14.
Yeah, but you don't really know when that occurred?
It would have been after the
Okay.
issue.
So when, do you know anything about the subject property? Like when possibly it was cleared out and totally renovated, so they're not probably subject to rent controls at that point?
Well, looking at the notes here, it was inspected June of 2015. Work was not fully yet completed. Occupancy started in March of 2015. Rents will not be increased until work is done and are currently renovated at pre-renovation level rents. They've done quite a lot of renovations. The cost in our notes says that they actually cost $670,000, including plumbing, electrical installation, roof doors, windows, mailboxes, flooring, appliances, bath and kitchen, lighting, drywall, painting, boilers, lead household. They've done a lot of work.
So you've used a cap rate of 6.6.
Yeah.
So that would be applicable to the area and to the age. So what about the renovations that probably took place? Did that come into play
Yes.
in regards to the cap rate?
The actual year build is 1926.
Yeah.
Our effective year build is 1945. Our groups are 1945 and earlier, 46 to 59, 60, 74, 75 to 97 and 98 and later. So
Do you have an effective age?
we have it, yeah, on my brief it says 1945. So we're at the top of the, so
Okay.
like,
The top of the ball.
the top of the bottom, basically. So if it was a 1946 effective age,
Okay.
it would be getting a lower cap than this. So I know it was asked whether it got a premium for this area. It does not, but it's really sitting right at the borderline. And it looks like they've done everything.
You haven't had the chance to really go through the property?
Unfortunately, I haven't had a
Yep.
chance to go through any of these properties.
All right. What is it? So the floor is yours?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The board will turn with me to page 3. So as was correctly surmised by the assessor, the issue that we have before the board today is one of capitalization, right? So The city's using a 6.6% capitalization rate. M&P's requesting a 7.57% capitalization rate based on some sales from the area. The board turns to me to page 4. On page 4, we have the current assessment for the property. So this, again, has been provided by the city of Winnipeg to the owner of this property. Page 5, we have the income valuation. So you can see that the net operating income of this property is actually really close to what the model's suggesting. And that issue is capitalization rate. M&P is requesting a market value of $1,183,316, or truncated to $1,184,000. Page 6, we have a map from the city of Winnipeg just showing the location of this particular property. And page 7, we have overhead map from Google Earth just identifying where that property is located. You can see it in the middle of the page. There's a red pin there located at 455 Agnes Street. Page 8, we have 2 exterior photos of the property, just showing what that property looks like. And then page 9, we have the income value parameters there at 5.2, just going through the revenue and vacancy and expenses there. The board will move with me to page 10. Page 10, we have the capitalization rate for this particular property. So again, indicating that the effective year is 1945 as determined by the assessment department. We've identified 3 sales that are located in reasonably close proximity to the subject property. With effective, we got an age of 1953. Again, using a very similar approach to what we've used in the past. We've used information from the CMHC report for the Zone 2, the Centennial area, using rents of $882 a month in terms of what the rent is, a 4% vacancy rate, and a 50% expense ratio. Using those parameters, we've then calculated what our estimated net operating income is for this particular for these properties. These properties all have 8 units, so because we're using the same parameters, we end up with the same estimated NOI for each one of these units. Taking the estimated net operating income, dividing it by the sale price, we end up with capitalization rates ranging from 9.39% to 6.07%. An average of the 3 at 7.57%. Again, problem when it comes to capitalization rates and it comes to sales in general is there's a lot of reasons people buy stuff. There's a lot of motivators. People have very different views on what the outcome's going to be. So, you know, I know we're looking at a bit of a range here. That's why we tend to try to take an average to get a sense of what that's looking like. Page 11, we have a map of the sales, just identifying where those sales are located in relation to the subject property. So you can see that the property at Sherbrooke and Notre Dame are located Sherbrooke and Ellis are located in pretty close proximity. Notre Dame is located a little bit further away. Again, we use the Notre Dame property. It's located within an approximately similar area, so that's why it's been utilized in our analysis. Page 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17 are just exterior photos of those particular properties that we've used in our analysis, just to take a look at what those look like. Page 17 is our conclusion. So M&P has considered the income approach to value for the properties using the NOI from the property and the capitalization rate derived from similar properties at 7.57%. M&P has arrived at our valuation of $1,183,316. And considering this, we are making a request before the board there. If the board will move forward with me, I'll provide some supporting documentation. So on page 20, you can find the income statement, income and expense statement for this particular property for 17 and 18. Page 22 to page 24 are just the information pieces for the city of Calgary, city of Winnipeg, my apologies, for each one of these properties that we've looked at. Page 27, we have the Johnson report just to outline as sales support for where we got those properties. So you can see the first property at 616 Sherbrooke that you can find on page 27. Page 29, you can find 1086 Notre Dame. And page 31, you can find 575 Ellis. Again, the reason we provide this documentation is just for the board's reference, so you can take a look at it, see the sale price, see the sale date, all that relevant information that's there. Again, just supporting the information that we have in our brief. Page 33 is the rental market report from CMHC for these particular properties. So again, when we look at this on page 34, you can see the various market areas that we have. The properties we're looking at are located in the Centennial area, which is Zone 2. And then if the board turns with me to page 38. Page 38, this is where we get our information for how we've used it. So you can see that Zone 2 for 1 bedrooms has a 3.7% vacancy rate. We've used 4% in our analysis. And you can see 1 bedrooms are renting at a rate of $882 per unit, per month. So again, that's where we've taken our parameters from when doing our capitalization rate analysis. Again, part of the challenge that we face is that we have to try to come up with, looking at the sales, come up with a reasonable way to determine what a capitalization rate would be for those particular properties. So that's why we're using that CMHC information. Following that, so if the board turns with me to page 43, to the end of the document, it's just supporting documentation, so the notice of appeal, as well as the assessment notice for this particular property. With that, I conclude my presentation. I welcome any questions from the board or from the assessor. Thank you very much.
I thank you. Matthew?
Okay, so on your page 10, you got your cap rate, and you did the same thing before CMHC calculated average. So those are just average parameters based on the information that was available to you, correct?
That's correct. So we don't have the actual income for each one of these properties. We've tried to get it. We went through Freedom of Information Act. We've asked the assessment department, and in neither case we provided that information. So we have to get creative and look at other ways.
Okay, so the properties on page 10, you have them as in Centennial. Now, Centennial, it includes some of the newer loft-style apartments downtown in terms of the calculation. Are you aware of that?
Again, I'm not familiar with the internal parameters of how CMHC calculates the rents. I've identified the areas that they've used. Again, we can see that they identify that they have a fairly high degree of confidence in the rents that they're generating. So, I mean, all the various buildings that are used in that, I can't speak specifically to.
Okay, so you used an average. Sherbrooke, Notre Dame, Ellis. There's also some properties, Markets, Ross Street, there's a new one in there, Princess, newer renegade lofts. Using the average, do you think that in your calculation of rent, that perhaps for Daniel Mack, Sergeant Park, and Spence, the rents might be overstated?
No, I mean, again, looking at your assessment brief, the properties that you're using are generating rents that are, $819 to $1,050 per unit. So again, looking at that, we feel that 883 is pretty reasonable in our analysis. So we don't feel that too much of a concern with that.
Okay. Say the rents were overstated based on a known sale price. That would in effect raise the NOI and produce an inflated cap rate?
Are we talking hypothetical or are we talking actual?
Yeah, hypothetical.
Well, I mean, again, I can't speak to any of these sales. We have the information before us. I can say that what we see in theory, what the theory tells us is that the cap rate is inversely related to the income a property is generating. So the higher the income a property is generating, the the higher the capital, or I guess it's directly related, not inversely related. So that is correct. The higher the income the property is generating, with a stable sale price, that higher the capitalization rate will be. So, yeah, that is correct.
And so that might be, so if it's inflated, it could be inflated, overstated rents, understated R&M, so on.
Again, based on looking at what you provided in your evidence brief, in terms of comparable rents for the area that you identified, we don't feel that $882 a unit is unreasonable for these particular properties.
When purchasing these properties, would the purchaser look at the actuals, or would they just look at the CMHC parameters and trying to ascertain how much revenue they can generate from the property?
Again, they'd be looking at both. So they'd be looking at what the property is actually generating as well as what the market's generating. So both would come into play when a property is being purchased.
All right, those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens?
Yeah, so you're showing us some sales and the way you've calculated it to come up with an average cap rate, but is there anything particularly about this building, this particular property, that you think warrants a higher cap rate than what's been assigned by the city? So something about, I mean, the building has been renovated.
Right.
So is there anything specific about this building that would?
Well, I'll be honest, I don't think the city's proven their capitalization. I think they've said 6.6. I don't think, as far as I see, I didn't see any sales to support 6.6 from the area. I mean, again, if we're looking at a model, and this is where the challenge is, you know, we don't have any evidence that the city has considered sales within this particular area or even looked at how they're selling. Different areas of the city transact differently. Different areas of the city have different expectations in terms of growth, in terms of rent changes and this and that, and demographic shifts. All these factors come into play. So understanding your point, do I see anything specific with this property that would support a higher capitalization rate? My answer to that would be the sales in the area.
Nothing specific about the property?
No, nothing specific in the property. Again, when we're looking at these properties, we are looking at and we provided the sales that we've utilized, we provided the parameters. You know, challenge with the model is you can't test it. You can't look to see what's behind under the hood.
I was just, okay, that's all I had, thank you.
So that's what we're providing.
Thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt?
Do you know anything about the condition of these properties that you provided examples of?
Again, I can only speak to the fact that what the information we have. I haven't toured the buildings. I can only we've showed the exterior photos of what those properties are like, as well as showing the years of construction and what the average suite size is within those properties. So unfortunately, beyond that, I can't speak to. I did try to see if I could pull renovations. Unfortunately, from what I was able to find online from the city of Winnipeg, there's not a ton of information about what the various renovations had taken place. Some information out there, but not an exhaustive list by any stretch of the imagination. So I can't speak to the direct comparability. All I can speak to is the area they're located in, the year of construction of the properties, and what those prices are.
Okay. So your comparables can be criticized as much as the assessors, in other words.
For sure. I mean, again, I think this is where the difference comes into play, is the fact that we are providing comparables for our capitalization rate. So we are saying, here are our 3 sales, here's a year of construction, here are the suites, here's the location, here's how we're coming up with a net operating income for these particular properties, and here's that capitalization rate. So that information is before the board to take a look at and to examine. And with a 6.6 capitalization rate, I mean, and that's where that shift is. That's where that difference is.
So just the city used average rents for this property of $761. You're
Right.
using $882.
882, correct.
City used a 2.6 vacancy. You're using 4.
That's correct.
And the city, on your expense, you used 50, and the city used 49.57.
Right.
So that's pretty darn close,
Yep.
right?
There's
So-
certainly comparables there, yeah.
Yeah.
And again, this is where we struggle, and this is where it's always going to be hard. Is the city has access to all this information. We don't. You phone up a property owner and you say, "Hey, what's going on with your rents?" And they tell you unless you want to buy our property, go away, we're not going to tell you. Because again, there's a certain element of, it's, it's confidential. There's a certain element of
For sure.
confidentiality there.
Absolutely.
So again, this is where we struggle is what we have to say, does this make sense? Does a 6.6% capitalization rate for this area, for this building, for this type of building make sense within the city of Winnipeg when we're looking at it? And the best we can do, and again, I understand that there's limitations to that, is to say what's out there in the market, look at CMHC, look at the area, use the parameters that are applied. We can see that the comparables brought forward by the assessor show that those parameters are certainly, 882 is not out of reach for these for properties within this area. There's properties that are generating more than that. So again, we have to say, would that, what does that look like? And we, again,
Okay.
that's where the challenge is.
Okay, thank you.
Either party wants summation?
I got one more question, actually.
Okay. Okay.
So the rents here, I'm seeing on my report is $805 for 2017. You got $882 from CMAC. This place is completely renoed. Comps used for your cap rate, they're not in the downtown exchange area. Do you know if they've been renovated to this extent?
Again, as I stated, I'm not aware.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Summation?
I think I said it last time.
Final word?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So again, the issue before the board really is one of the capitalization rate, trying to determine what is the appropriate capitalization rate for this property. We've seen that the city of Winnipeg has applied a 6.6% capitalization rate, but again, when we look at that, we don't see the sales that were utilized to determine that. We don't see the parameters that were used to determine that. We don't have that information before us. What we do see is what MEP has provided. We provided the board with 3 sales that are within the area. We provided the board with our explanation of how we derived the net operating income. From that, we've used market information from CMHC. When we compare that to information from the assessor's brief, we can see that those parameters are not out of line. The assessor's parameters brief showing that these properties within this area are generating more than $882 a unit for rent. Again, taking all that into consideration, we feel that we are supporting a higher capitalization rate. We have provided that information to the board for their consideration. And with that, MP respectfully requests the board to reduce the assessment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we're going to take a break for how long?
5 minutes or less.
5 minutes?
Actually, if we could do 5, I would have to use the bathroom myself.
Absolutely.
Unless people, don't feel that.
I think, that one, did we finish that one? Yes. We'll call the meeting back to order. I think, yes, we finished that. Okay, we'll go on to 701 Wellington. Whenever you're ready, you can take us through this property.
Roll number 1304-0135-000, 701 Wellington, April 1st, 2018, reference date 638,000. Actual year built, 1967, effective year built, 1967, 18 suites, 5 outdoor parking spots. They've been handing the mailers in, you can see on page 2. We had a sale, October 2016, 289,000. 18 suites, there's 9 one-bedrooms, 3 two-bedrooms. Got the average monthly rent at $535,000. $535.45. Calculated with our 5.3 capitalization rate, 638,000. See the rent comparables on page 4. The rent comparables similar to the subject property in terms of average monthly rent per unit. The subject property does have bachelor units, which the comparables do not. We are below the comparables, so that's where it should be. by virtue of if they're in the same condition, the bachelor units would demand less rent on the open market. However, we are a bit newer than this comparable properties on effective year built. So if you go to page 5. So with this property, I tried to look at the income and expenses on it, and you'll notice a whole bunch of color on my page. And why is that? Well, when I was looking at the income and expenses and I was filling out my chart here, I noticed a lot of similarities between the numbers that was submitted to the city. So in yellow, those are the numbers that are all the same. So for laundry, 14 to 17, they've submitted the same thing. Parking, that's could be possible. But when we're looking at things like insurance, office supplies, marketing, advertising, particularly repair and maintenance, waste and snow removal, it appears that they are just filling out the mailer with highly similar numbers. Well, not highly similar numbers, for the most part, they're the same. They've said 1,200 a unit on the R&M side every single year. Now, we don't see this. We've all looked at properties here before at the Board of Revision, we've looked at income and expenses. I've never seen a property where so many of the expenses are exactly to the dollar the same. So, in my opinion, these expenses are real. So, given that the expenses, I wasn't able to ascertain anything from them, we used the parameters. Now, somebody had looked at this property and reviewed it, not close enough, and they had applied an override to the expense ratio of 70%. Now, that's not realistic. However, that is what's generating the assessment in front of us today. Last time, it was cut to 529. This time, we're 638. I don't know what the income and expenses submitted to the department were prior to that, which possibly would have been reviewed, and why that cut was made. But I think a 70% expense ratio is pretty strong for applying for, but that is what we sent out, so I'm not asking for an increase. Interesting to note, 1,200 units also, that number's gonna come up in the future. So, yeah, I can't use these expenses, they don't make any sense, and I think the appellant's got different numbers as well. So, for that reason, I didn't make a change. Also, the utilities as per effective gross income, 34%. Usually they're in around 15% of the effective gross income. So that looks to be way out of line as well. No change to the assessment on this one. Thank you.
I thank you. Questions?
I don't really know what questions to ask, I'll be perfectly honest. I guess that's that. I don't have anything to ask, sorry. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Nisbet?
No, no question.
Ms. Stevens?
Nope, I was gonna ask about the 70%, but you.
Yeah, me too.
So,
The floor is yours, sir.
Excellent, thank you very much. So, the board will turn with me to page 3. So the issue is actually funding life expenses, because they are actually generating the expenses of this property about 75%, and the capitalization rate for this particular property. I believe the city's used a 5.3% capitalization rate for this property, and we're requesting a 5.77% capitalization rate. Page 4 contains the current assessment for the property. So this is collected by the City of Winnipeg, provided by the City of Winnipeg to the owner. Page 5 is the income valuation for this particular property. So I want to apologize firstly, when I was looking at this property, so I fat fingered, so two things. One, I used the 2018 information, and I should have used 2017, and two, I fat fingered one of the numbers on 2017.
So where are we looking? Sorry, what
So,
page?
just to give you the heads up that page 5, those numbers are a little bit different. So
Okay.
yeah, so I apologize. Just get out ahead. Just let the board know that just that situation. If the board will turn with me to page 9. So page 9, we have 2018 and 2017. 2017, that number should read 120,173, not 129,173. So that should be 120,173 for the revenue. The vacancy would change to $3,605.19. The expenses should remain the same. There's no change to the expenses. And then the net operating income should be $30,562. That $30,562 is about 10% lower than the net operating income assessed for the property at $33,795. The board turns with me to page 25. You can find the income and expense statement for this particular property. So page 4, you can see that for 17-18 now. The assessor had indicated that 34% for utilities is high, but that's the number we got. So when we look at page 25, you can see that so the number is a little bit lower than what the assessor has, but it's still $33,498 for 2017, and you can see for 2018 it's $30,801. So the numbers are not low on that. So again, the information that I provided is from the income and expense statement, which was provided by the owner for this particular property. I'm not sure of why there is a disconnect between what the assessment department has and what we have. I've certainly asked the question. I haven't heard back yet, but it's something we can follow up with the owner on and have a conversation with. So anyway, the numbers that we have, you can see on page 9, are the ones that we've collected from the income expense forms. So that would be, so that net operating income as indicated was $30,562 once we recalculate. When we look at the expense ratio, so again, if we look at 86,605, we look at what the expense, the gross income for this property is, and we look at that. We can see that that is 74%. So the income expenses, or the expense ratio is 74% for this particular property. So again, I understand the assessor's concern in regards to the information. I can't speak to where that information came from, but what I can speak is to the information that we have before the board right today. And that does support that. The expense ratio for this property is 74% using that information. Page 10, we have the issue of capitalization rate. So again, as mentioned, the city of Winnipeg has used a 5.3% capitalization rate for this particular property. When we look at these, we've provided 6 sales that we've looked at. These sales we've identified there in the table. So again, in order to determine what the capitalization rate is, we've used the information from CMHC to calculate zone 1 rents for 1-bedroom rents for zone 2, which is Centennial, which are $882 per month, using a 4% vacancy and a 15% expense ratio, as well as zone 3 Midland, which are $767 a month, 5% vacancy rate and 50% expense ratio. So what we've done is, after we've identified those particular properties, so the Midland properties, just for the board's reference, are 1445 Magnus, 1626 Magnus, as well as 600 Charles. So those 3 properties have expense rents of $767 a month, 5% vacancy and 50% expense ratio, and then the remaining properties have that Centennial 2 of $882 a month, 4% vacancy, 50% expense ratio. Applying that to the properties, we capitalization rates ranging from 4.38% to 6.97%, Looking at an average of these properties, we get an average of 5.77%. That's where we get a request of 5.77%. Page 11, we show a map of where these properties are located. So the subject property is located with the red pin at 701 Wellington Avenue. The remaining properties you can identify there, see are located actually in reasonably close proximity to the property. Again, not exactly close, but as close as we could get them in looking at year of construction as well as area were factors that we took into consideration when trying to determine capitalization rate. Page 12 starts with each one of these comparable properties. So we just show exterior pictures of that. So you can see page 12, which is 340 Arlington. Page 14, 1626 Magnus. Page 16, 1445 Magnus. Page 18, 47 Carlton. Page 20, 600 Charles. So what we have there, on one side is the information from the city of Winnipeg for that property, and on the other page we just have that city of a picture. So in conclusion, again, when we look at this particular property, we have two issues. The first is the expense ratio, which is used for the property. The city of Winnipeg is using an expense ratio of 70%. The expense ratio for this property is closer to 75%. And the second one is the capitalization rate. So the city of Winnipeg has used a 5.3% capitalization rate. We've identified 6 sales. Using those, we've generated a 5.77% capitalization rate. M&P is requesting a value of $485,365 for this particular property. Page 25 is the income and expense statement for 701 Wellington. So this was information which was provided by the owner of this particular property. So you can see there the expenses for this particular property. The expenses there are $102,317. However, that does include amortization of $14,339, which needs to be removed, as well as mortgage interest of $11,049. And as well as their general administrative expenses below there as well. Page 27 contains what the assessment was for this property previously. As mentioned by the assessor, it was $529,000 for the last assessment cycle. This assessment cycle is $638,000. I believe that's about a 15% increase in value for this particular property. Page 29, page 30, I guess, is the first sale that we have. So again, this is supporting sales documentation we provided to support the sales we've used. So the first one is 1445 Magnus and 340 Arlington. You can find those sales on page 30. Page 32, you can see the sale at 600 Charles. Page 34, you can see the sale at 1626 Magnus. And then finally on page 36, you can see the sale at 47 Carlton. So each one of those is just supporting the sales which were utilized by M&P in our analysis. Starting on page 38, continuing on until page, continuing on until page 47 is the CMHC report. And if the board will turn with me to page 43, you can see Zone 2 Centennial has a vacancy rate of 3.7%. And then Midland below Zone 3 has a 5% vacancy rate. The same thing for 1 bedrooms. For Centennial, you can see that the rental rate is $882 a month, and for Midland is $767 a month, based on the survey from CMHC. Following that, on page 49 to the end of the package is the assessment notice as well as the notice of hearing. And with that concludes my presentation. I welcome any questions from the board or from the assessor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Questions of the applicant?
Given that they submitted what appears to be incorrect expenses over a period of several years to the city of Winnipeg, are you confident that the numbers that they've given you are accurate?
I'd have no reason to disbelieve it. So again, we have the income and expense statement they provided us. I'm relying on the information that they provide us is accurate. So if you ask, have I done an audit of the income and expense statement? No. I've taken the income and expense statement that they provided and used that in my analysis.
Yeah, okay. Now, I know we've mistakenly applied a 70% expense ratio to this property. In your experience, do properties typically operate in this level of expenses on a year-to-year basis without capital improvements being done?
It's unusual for sure, but I think when you look at the utilities, I mean, the utilities alone, we're looking at we're looking at over 20% from the utilities. So, and then you have your additional expenses on there. So, while I will say it's not super common, we see the information in black and white before the board here supporting that this building is struggling with a high amount of expenses. So again, in viewing that, we don't feel that 70% is wrong. In fact, we feel that 75% would probably be more correct when looking at this particular property, just due to, as we look at it.
So, okay, so on page 10, you got some cap rate sales. You've used estimated CMHC stuff. Are you aware if any of these properties, have you inspected any of these properties?
No, I have not. The best we've done is exterior. We have not done internal inspections on any of these.
Are you aware if any of them are in disrepair and in terms of which would influence their sale price, or they've been completely renovated?
Exteriorly, we didn't see any evidence that they're in disrepair. So again, I can't speak to the interior of the properties. And then in regards to the renovations, again, I tried to pull some information from the City of Winnipeg website, but limited in terms of what we can get. So we weren't able to ascertain much more than what's publicly available.
I just asked my other questions in regards to this situation for cap rate applied to this property as well.
Pardon?
Just in terms of market versus actual.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to repeat them just so we can move.
Oh, okay, okay. All right.
I thank you. Ms. Nesbitt?
I have no questions.
Ms. Stevens?
No, I'm good, thank you.
I'm okay also. So I think that concludes that one. So we'll go on to 340 St. Anne's Road. So whenever you're ready.
Just for summation,
sorry.
I don't need to summarize. It's just it's going to be the same for most of this stuff.
Okay. I just like to, but
Yeah. I don't need to say it. I just wasn't sure if it's I say it once, it's kind of, and the board hears it and they look at it and carry it on, or if I need to say it for every
you
hearing.
can say it at the very end.
Well, it doesn't seem efficient that way. It seems, and it feels that would just be more annoying to everybody.
Okay.
But
Matthew, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Roll number 08002313000, 340 St. Anne's Road. 2020 rural year assessed at $2,235,000, April 1st, 2018 reference date. It's an apartment built in '58. It's got an effective year built of 1978 on it. It's had some renovations. 16 suites, 12 outdoor parking spots. Wood or steel frame exterior walls. You'll see on page 2 that there was a request for income information. They've been following through. We got a sale on the property. 2012, May, $1,160,000. Modeled income value summaries on page 3. So we've got 2.6 on the vacancy rate. We've got average monthly rent of $972. Effective gross income 181,824. Model expense ratio. Come with our 4.7 capitalization rate. We get our value on page 5 of our rental comps. In the area, it's bracketed by the properties in the area: St. Anne, St. Mary's, Belleville, Dakota, similar vintage of the subject property is at the higher end of the effective year build scale. So it also has bachelor units. That is something to note. The other properties do not. Important to note as well is comparable number 3, Belleville. I wouldn't put as much weight on, just given that it is an 11-story building and we're looking at low rises here. Dakota's tall as well, but the first 2 properties, St. Anne's and the same areas, comparables 1 and 2, do bracket the subject property. So I put my weight on those. Cap rate, evidence is 4A, 5, we've talked about that in other hearings. Net operating income on this property found on page 7 is $110,000. We're at $105,000 modeled. The year before that, found on page 12, they're at $112,000 net operating income. The last page shows that there's been some renovations done to the property. There's an ad I pulled from the computer, just showing that they've done a heck of a lot of work there. So they didn't take out permits. Or not in Amanda, in one of our systems, but I did find this elsewhere. It's dated in 2000, May 1st, 2014, so it would have been after the sale. Looks like they did exterior renovations, new boiler, doors, window replacements, brick repointing on the exterior, including work inside, plumbing, kitchens, bathrooms.
Sorry, just a quick question. Where am I, can you direct me to what page you are in?
I'm
in the
just
package?
verbally, I just have a manual.
Oh, okay, sorry, I was.
So that's not part of evidence, I'm just.
Oh, okay.
I've just left you guys on the last page here and just describing that they've done work after the sale in 2012. So our net operating income looks like it's a little bit low. Cap is done by each area and size. There is no need to make a change on this one.
Your presentation?
Yeah.
Okay. Questions of the assessor?
Yeah. So if we can turn to page 3. So this property is assessed at $140,000 per unit. And when I look at page 4A and I look at the sales you're bringing forward, again, these are the sales that you're looking at. I've got 100,000 a unit, 70,000 a unit, 96,000 a unit. And then the one is 2006 is 174, which I'd argue is probably not super comparable. But the other 3, you know, there's a pretty big difference there between 130,000, almost 140,000 and the 3 sales you got there. Is that not a little concerning?
I don't think so.
Okay. Next question is, you're using a 4.7% capitalization rate, and when I look on page 5 and I look at all the market reports, I don't see anybody coming close to 4. You know, I see 5 and up, even for for high rise, low rise A, low rise B. You know, 5 and up. I don't see anything below 5. Again, does that not give pause for concern?
We get all the income and expense statements. We have a greater bank of information than these organizations do.
All right. That concludes my questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens?
So I know the cap is model driven. Where did you say the age cutoffs were? You were mentioning them before. You had 1945, and then what was the next?
So it goes 45 and earlier, then it goes 46 to 59, then 1960 to 1974, then 75 to 97,
75 to 97, okay.
and then 98 and later.
So this has been, yeah, so this is in that range, okay. Okay, that's all I had, thanks.
But
Just on the cap, this is one of your best cap rates for properties that I've seen. It's a 1978 building, so it's not the newest of buildings that I've seen. Other cap rates coming in at around 5%. Can you just explain to me why the 4.7? That's pretty aggressive cap rate.
Well, the modelers look at the income and expense statements, and they look at the sales they get. As per age, area, and size, this property falls into this bucket in terms of getting the 4.7 cap. Looking at the pictures at the end of the brief here, looks like they've done some nice renovations on it. The bottom picture looks like they may have even opened up a wall there. It looks good. It looks like a good property. There's lots of rental around that area. That's close to, it's not too far from University of Manitoba in terms of hitting Bishop and then going to U of M.
So where is this on St. Anne's? I know I'll probably see it in the other brief, but whereabouts in St. Anne's?
This property is, can't look at the map. I usually write it down the intersection.
That's okay.
It looks like it's St. Anne's and Barton.
And where?
Barton. It's near Havelock,
Okay.
Portland. So you continue down and you hit Bishop Brown.
Yeah.
It looks like from that photograph, it's across from that big, there's the three large
Right.
apartment buildings there. That looks like them across the
Oh,
street.
right,
I'm not
the
sure,
Clayton
but
Drive
that's what it
area.
looks like, yeah. Clayton Drive, thank you. That's the
Yeah.
street I was looking for.
That's where it is. I can see it from the map
Yeah.
here. Okay. Pretty boxy, plain box on the outside, pretty swanky inside.
Yeah.
Wonder if it's what,
Digitally done.
rendered?
Unless, yeah, I mean, that's something I've never heard before.
I
It's a new
know.
one we gotta come up with.
It's a new thing. It's a new thing for all of us. I hadn't heard that before either. Okay, thank
Renter
you.
beware.
Yeah.
Great. Wesley, the floor is yours, sir.
Excellent, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Board will turn with me to page 3 and get started. Should come as no surprise, the issue before the board really is one of capitalization rate, and we're supporting that with sales that we have. So the city's using a 4.7% capitalization rate. M&P is asking for a capitalization rate of 5.25 based on sales in the area. Secondly, when we look at sales, the property is assessed at a value of almost $140,000 a unit. When we look at sales, we're getting an average of $104,000 a unit. So again, we think that this is probably a pretty good indicator that this property is overassessed. Page 4, we have the current assessment. So this is provided by the City of Winnipeg to the owner with the assessment parameters for this property, showing what was used to go into the valuation. You can see a 4.7% capitalization rate has been utilized. Page 5, we have the income parameters. So property is generating a little bit higher than the assessed income, but by the time you can take into factor the vacancy as well as the expense allowance, we end up basically with net operating income, which is pretty close to what is being assessed. Page 6, we have the location of that property. So as indicated, it is located along St. Anne's. This map has been provided by the City of Winnipeg. And then page 7 is just a satellite map showing where the property is located, just a little bit more detail there, and just to give a sense of where that property is located. So. Page 8 are just two external photos of that property, and page 9 is the income information for that property for 17 and 18. Page 10 is what I'll get the board to turn to next, and this is the capitalization rate for the property. So as indicated, so as mentioned earlier on in my presentation, we identified 6 properties with kind of similar years of construction to the subject property. So the subject property, the City of Winnipeg is assessed for the effective year of 1978. The properties we can see in the table have age of 1963 to 1979. Again, I can't speak to whether or not this is the effective age. We can speak to this is the information we have received. So if the city's got a different effective age on it, I'm not sure. We have the number of suites within the property. Similar to what we've done in the past, we've used information from CMHC to determine what the rental rates should be. So the properties are located in two areas. Some are located in St. Vital and some are located in St. Boniface. For the properties in St. Vital, we're using the one-bedroom rent of $985 a unit, and for the properties in St. Boniface, we're using the one-bedroom unit rent of $890 per unit. A 3% vacancy and a 15% expense ratio is utilized. Now, again, when looking at this information, this is the information we have. However, I mean, based on the information from the subject property, as well as looking at the comparables brought forward by the city of Winnipeg, that $985 for St. Vital and $890 for St. Boniface certainly does fall within the range of what these properties are generating within that area. So using that information, M&P is calculating capitalization rates from 3.65% up to 6.27%. So again, looking at these sales, we take an average and we get an average of 5.21%, or a median of 5.43%. So again, this brings forward the question, is that 4.7% really reasonable? When we apply parameters that from CMHC and we look at what the city of Winnipeg is using, we can see that, and it's supporting the fact that they're not unreasonable. We are getting different capitalization rates, and we are supporting a capitalization rate that is more along the lines of 5.25% versus that 4.7% used by the city. The next consideration would be found on page 11. So again, what we've done is we've looked at the sales comparables we've brought forward. We've looked at the age, we've looked at the average suite size, and we've looked at the sale date. Using that information, we've calculated a sale price per unit. Again, understanding that these properties are purchased and sold based on the income approach. The sales comparison approach is just a really handy way to take another look at these properties, particularly when we don't have a lot of information for the income. So what we can see here is we can see when we look at the value per unit that these properties are selling for values between $82,667 per unit up to $142,105. When we look at the average, we've got an average of $104,626 and a median of $100,500. One interesting thing to point out is one of the comparisons that the city of Winnipeg has used, 1000 St. Mary's, was a sale that transacted. You can see that on the bottom of the list there, 1000 St. Mary's, 1963 year construction, 914 square feet for the average unit size. The property sold in February of 2016 for $824,000. When we look at that on a per unit basis, we're at $103,000 per unit. It's worth noting that our subject property is assessed at $139,000 per unit, so we're quite a bit higher than that. So again, just keep in mind that the city is identifying this as a comparable. In their analysis, they're showing that the rents that this property is generating are a little higher than the subject property. And when we look at that sale price, we can see that that sale price is showing that assessment maybe is out of line there. Page 12, we have a map of the sales that we've utilized. So you can see that 340 St. Anne's Road, the subject property is identified with the red pin. 1000 St. Mary's would be the closest pin, that's the orange, and then the other properties are located more centrally. Of those properties, we have page 13, 284 Notre Dame, page 14, 429 Richard? Sorry, I apologize, I am terrible with names. So, 15.
Oh no.
Sorry?
Oh no.
All no? There we go. Thank you. I appreciate it. 16 Provencière, 331 and 335. 17 Traverse, 271. And then page 18, 1000 St. Mary's. Again, this property has been identified by the city of Winnipeg as a comparable property. And when we look at this, we can see what that looks like in terms of physical characteristics of that property. It's also worth noting that using the parameters from CMHC of the 985 rental rate, 3% vacancy, and 50% expense ratio. This property sold with a 5.57% estimated capitalization rate. So, in looking at this property and looking on page 19, so we've looked at this property two ways. The first is to look at the income approach. So, using a capitalization rate of 5.25%, MVP is arriving at a valuation of $2,073,000 for this property. The second is to use a sales comparison approach. Looking at that, we get a value of between 1.6 million and 1.64 million for this property. Again, looking at the two values, we feel that that 2.73 million is the most appropriate, and that would be driving our request. Starting on page 22, we have the income expense statement for this particular property. Just a note that this property is 50% owned, so you got to multiply those numbers by 2. Page 24, we have the value for this property. So it's worth noting that the property was 1.924 million last assessment cycle. We're at 2.235 million this year. Page 55, continuing on until page 31 are just the is the information which has been utilized for the comparable properties in the analysis. Again, that's information provided by the City of Winnipeg. Page 34 contains the first four properties in our analysis. This is the Johnson report. This provides the civic address, the age, the number of units, the building area, the sale date, the sale price, all of those things. And 36 contains the last property as well. So again, page 36 and 38 have the remaining properties. So just for the board's reference, in case you're wondering where we're getting our numbers from, this is just supporting documentation for that. Starting at page 40 and continuing on until page 49 is the CMHC report. Again, this is just outlining what the rents are for these various areas. If the board looks with me on page 45, you can see here for St. Boniface, they've got a 2.4% vacancy rate, so we've just used 3, and St. Vital has a 1.8% vacancy rate. We've used 3 for that as well, just for simplicity's sake. And then when looking at the rents, you can see $890 for St. Boniface and $985 for St. Vital. So again, just looking at where that supporting information comes from for our analysis. Following that, page 51 until the end of the brief is just supporting documentation. So that's the assessment notice and the notice of hearing there for if there's any questions that arise. With that, I conclude my presentation and I welcome any questions from the board or from the assessor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the applicant?
Yeah. This is the same owner as the last property, right?
This is.
The thing is just important to know, I noticed some similarities in terms of the income and expenses submitted to the city on my page 7 and page 12. You're confident that the expenses that they provided to you are the actual expenses?
I have no reason to disbelieve that.
So, on your cap stuff, this property has been renovated. Do you know if any of these properties in your capitalization rate study have been renovated?
No, but when we look at the actual, when we look at the income, particularly for 1,000 centimeters, we can actually see that the income that they're generating is higher than the subject property. So, again, when we look at caps based on income, and when we look at the parameters we've used, we feel that the parameters are fairly close in line. So we have no reason to believe that our parameters are incorrect.
Can you confirm that these are arm's length sales?
Again, we provided the sales documentation to support where we've gathered the sales from. As far as our understanding is that these were, as far as we know, arm's length transactions, but I have not phoned each owner individually to confirm.
Okay, so you've got various ages of properties here on your page 10. They go from 63 up to 79. You applied a 50% expense ratio to all these properties. Can you give us an idea where that comes from?
Again, expense ratio of 50% would be probably pretty typical. There's some variance there based on the properties itself. Challenge we have is without having the income expense statement for each property. There's entirely possible that the expense ratios for some could be higher or lower. So using 50% we just felt was pretty reasonable. Across the board, I think the subject property is assessed with a 42% expense ratio, so we felt that 50 was, certainly not out of line.
Given that the people purchasing this property would have had access to the most recent income and expense mailers, would they not weigh more heavily upon the individual performance of the subject property than market averages?
Hard to say. I can't. Every buyer is going to be different. Buyers certainly are going to be looking at both what the market's generating as well as what the property's generating. They all come into play. I can't speak to each individual buyer because they're all different. But they'd all be those would be certainly factors they'd be looking at.
All right, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Nesbitt?
Oh, no, I have no questions, thank
Okay,
you.
Ms. Stevens?
No, I'm good too, thank you.
I have none either. Either party wants summation?
Again, I think when we look at the sales, particularly when we consider 1,000 St. Mary's, there's a pretty strong indication that the property is overassessed. As such, MP's respectfully requesting the board to reduce it. Thanks.
All right, thank you. We'll go on to the last one, which is Agnes, 568. Whenever you're ready. We should have done the two Agneses together, but
Do you guys ever deviate from the docket if it makes sense to group them differently, or is that
if
just
somebody's got to catch a plane, yeah.
Even if they don't.
no? But just more. I mean, I know in some
Well,
cases,
sure,
it's-
we will.
Okay.
Somebody, yeah.
Like if you're like these two properties are kind of similar, let's group them together.
No.
These are all in the same area. You're gonna hear the
Sometimes
same
you get a
things.
lot of people, and everybody wants to be first.
No, but I mean more like if I've
One applicant.
yeah for the 6 files, like and just so I know, like if we got a couple properties, we're talking the same sales over and over and over again, as opposed to having them like interspersed throughout the hearing, one in the middle and then the last, grouping them together.
You would probably group them.
Yeah.
We group them, yeah.
You
Okay.
can make that request at the
Yeah.
beginning of the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, all right,
I mean, you are grouped here, so you're okay.
okay, all right. I wasn't
It
sure.
doesn't make a lot of sense for the other two people that were here, or the other, they had only 2 and you
Yeah.
got,
Oh yeah, for sure.
So.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I just meant more within my docket if it makes more sense to order them differently, or if we're married to the order that they're in.
No.
Okay.
No, I think she more or less sets it up according to the role, and it so happens that, we should have maybe picked out Agnes because they're very similar, I guess, so.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right, that's good.
But anyways, let's go on to the last one.
Sorry, I apologize
That's
for the
okay.
delay.
No, it's good to ask.
Roll number 1304126, 4,468 Agnes Street. 2020 roll year, April 1st, 2018 reference date, assessed at 583,000. This one was built in 1929. We don't have an effective year built on it. 11 suites, just one outdoor parking spots. We're handing in the mailers on page 2, income summary as per the model on this one. So what you'll see, we've got $628 on the rent, $82,984 gross potential, model vacancy, modeled 53.86% expense ratio for net operating income of $37,293 with a 6.4 cap rate, age, area, and size. Generates our value, 583,000 or 53,000 suites. Drink comp on page 4. Bracketed by the properties in the area of similar age. This one only has 1 bachelor suite. It's got 10 one-bedroom. There's a mix in terms of the rents of the other properties in terms of their bedroom count. But they're predominantly 1-bedroom aside from comparable number 3, Langside, which has an equal amount of 2-bedroom units. Page 4, you'll see the reported income and expenses, and you'll see a similar scenario as we've seen for the past 2 properties, where they're submitting $1,200 a unit every year for repair and maintenance. The same waste and so the same marketing, advertising, wages, supplies, and this is not simply reality. In terms of reviewing income and expense statements, being here at the Board of Revision, every other property, they're different. So I don't think these are their actual expenses, not what they're giving to the city. So given that I didn't have anything to go off of, I just stuck with the model on this one. That's my evidence, thank you.
Thank you. Questions of the assessor?
None for me, thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry?
None for me, thank you very much,
Okay,
Mr.
thank
Chair.
you. Ms. Stevens?
The previous Agnes property, the model had put a 6.6 cap on it. And that was, it had an effective age that was much newer than this one, and then this one's come out at 6.4. Any idea what might have happened there?
Okay, so that one was over 15,000 square feet, so
Okay.
it gets 6.6.
So it's the size,
It's
okay.
just the size.
Yeah.
And that one was on the very cusp.
Cusp of it, yes, I recall that.
And probably could have.
Okay,
been
so the cap is related to the size, okay.
Okay, that was my question.
Okay, that's all I had, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Nesbit?
I had the same question about caps, so.
Okay. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Board will turn with me to page 3. 2 issues for this particular property. One is the expenses. The property's been assessed with a 53.86% expense ratio. However, the actual expenses in the property are 66.94%. And the capitalization rate. The capitalization rate has been assessed at 6.4, but looking at similar sales, M&P is arriving at a capitalization rate of 7.96%. Page 4 is the current assessment from the City of Winnipeg. So just outlining the parameters which were utilized to value this property. Page 5 is the assessed versus actual parameters for this particular property. So you can see here that the net income is pretty similar. Actually, the net income is quite a bit lower at $28,983, and the reason for that is due to the expenses within the property. Additionally, the 7.96% capitalization rate being utilized, generating a value of $364,107. It's worth noting that the value of this property is increased by almost 15% from last cycle to this cycle. Last cycle, the property is valued at $508,000. This cycle is valued at $583,000. Page 6 is just the location of that particular property. This is courtesy from the City of Winnipeg's assessment website. Page 7 is a satellite map of the property, just showing the location within the city. Page 8 are just 2 external pictures of that particular property. And page 10 is the income for that particular property. Now, I should note off the top that this is for 2018. That was the information we received for this particular property. So it is a little after the valuation date. However, it is worth noting that this is, again, when we look at $28,000, $893 versus $37,293, it's unlikely that it's going to make up that $10,000 difference within. The value is going to fluctuate by $10,000 over the course of a year. Page 11, we have the capitalization rate, which we've been looking at, and the sales that we'll be considering. So these sales have been selected due to their location, their age, and their average suite size. So again, to determine what the parameters would be for these particular properties, we lack the information from the City of Winnipeg. We don't have the income information. So what we've used is the next best opportunity. We've used the information from CMHC for 1 bedrooms located in Zone 2, the Centennial area. Rents of $882 per month, a 4% vacancy rate, and a 50% expense ratio. Using these parameters, we come up with an estimated net operating income ranging from, for these properties, ranging from $106,687 to $187,972. Using this, we get capitalization rates ranging from 5.98% up to 10.16%. Looking at this, we get an average of 7.96%. That's where we get our average of 7.96%. If the board looks on page 12, we've identified where those sales are located in comparison to the subject property. So the subject property is the red pin on the map, that is 568 Agnes Street. The remaining properties, you can see where they're located. The arrows are pointing to 445 Kennedy and 340 Vaughan. Page 13 starts with the pictures of these comparable properties. So the first one is 212 Langside. Page 16 is 45 Carlton. Page 18 is 71 Kennedy. Page 19 is 616 Sherbrooke. Page 21 is 552 Sherbrooke. Page 23 is 445 Kennedy. Page 25 is 340 Vaughan for the board's reference. Just so exterior photos, and just so the board knows, I have not internally inspected these comparable properties. What we have is we have the exterior photos there. In terms of the conclusion, again, in looking at the property and the income approach, M&P is using a capitalization rate of 7.96 based on similar properties to derive a value request of $364,200. Supporting documentation, page 29, we have information to the Canada Revenue Agency. So this is information for this particular property for that income information as referenced earlier on. So this is where the income information was gathered. Page 32 is the assessment for this particular property. This is from the City of Winnipeg's assessment website, just showing what the assessment was last cycle at $508,000 and the assessment of this cycle of $583,000. Page 32, continuing on until page 38, are just the documents from the City of Winnipeg's website outlining the assessments for each one of the comparable properties that have been utilized. Starting on page 41, we have the sales which were used in our report. So we have the 212 Langside, 340 Vaughan. Page 43, we have the next two, 445 Kennedy and 552 Sherbrooke. Page 47, we have 45 Carlton. Did I miss one? 45 is Kennedy, sorry if I didn't say that. 445 is Kennedy, and 47 is 45 Carlton. Page 49 is the CMHC report, which has been provided to the board there. You can find the report starting on page 49, and you can find the income parameters which were utilized starting on page 54. You can see for Centennial that 3.7% vacancy and the $882 rental rate for one bedrooms. Starting on page 59 and to the end of the package is just the administrative documents, so the notice of assessment or the hearing notice. With that, I conclude my presentation. I welcome any questions from the board or from the assessor. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of the applicant?
Yeah, just your comps. Do you think you might be overstating the rent on these comps for your cap rate study, given that CMHC average includes more expensive loft-style apartments that would pull the average up, like 882 on Langside?
I mean, again, I don't have access to the rents for these properties, so I can't say for sure. What I can tell you is what we've done, which is use the information from CMHC in terms of determining how to calculate that. In terms of calculating those estimated NOIs.
So if they were overstated in your calculation, that would produce an artificially high cap rate?
Yep. But again, we don't have that information before us. So I've outlined the sales that we've utilized to the board as well as their methodology and how we've applied it. and as well what the outcome from that methodology is, showing that 7.96% capitalization rate.
So these are the numbers, these are the real numbers on page 30?
Again, the numbers that were provided to me, I have not done an audit of any of the financial statements, so.
Here were the 2018 full year expenses is post-reference and returns in regards to our April 1st, 2018 reference date.
Yeah, I do realize that. However, again, when we look at it, it'd be our contention that, you know, when we look at the expense, when we look at the net operating income, it's $10,000 lower than what the city has determined to be. When we look at the parameters, we don't feel that there would be really any difference between 17 and 18. So we do feel it would still be reflective of 17.
My other questions for Captain on the properties rolled into this one. Back
Okay.
to questions, thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt,
No questions.
Ms. Stevens?
Just, the city has this effective age as the actual year built. Are you aware of any renovations to this property?
I'm not.
Okay, thank you, that's all I had.
Matthew, summary if you so desire.
Just in general, I don't think that using market averages based on the sale prices, using a flat rate of 50% expense ratios is an accurate way to establish numbers. Now, I understand the issue, the position he's in, he doesn't have the information, but I mean, I haven't seen it done in a textbook. I haven't. Given that the purchasers using the sale examples and our use, it's taken from the actual income and expenses, that's the actual cap rate that's generated based on the sale price. So I would ask that you go with our cap rates. Thank you.
Thank you. Wesley,
Thanks,
final
Rick.
word?
Again, when we look at the sales, the city's using a 6.4% capitalization rate, but if you look through the documentation, there's no sales to actually support that. They basically say, if the model punches it out, and this is what we got. We provided sales, we provided our methodology in terms of how we determined that, we provided an explanation of how we've done that, we provided our capitalization rate study for the board's consideration. So with that, we do feel that we have provided the information necessary, and we respectfully request the board to increase the capitalization rate and reduce the assessment. Thank you very much.
I thank you. I think that concludes our hearing this afternoon. So thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for having me.
Enjoy Winnipeg.
Wow,
And results very soon.
excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.